Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
It may be full of snow and ice in the real world in December, but right here at Silverstone, the home of British motorsport in iRacing, it's very much sunny conditions, bright skies, and a very clear, dry, and very thawed-out circuit. Welcome everybody to rounds 4, 5, and 6 of the 2022-2023 BRSCC Winter eSports Series. It's going to be fantastic to see more of our regular drivers from real-world BRSCC Series tackling the virtual world. And after the domination of Will Redford in the first 3 races at Alton Park, the question now has to be, is anyone going to be capable to stop him? Well, at the moment, he's not the fastest man in qualifying, which we'll get to in just a moment's time, but it should be quite a fascinating prospect, particularly with a circuit that's wide, that's fast, and that should be prime for overtaking in several different spots. Good evening, everybody. Scott Woodwiz and Andy Thompson here on commentary, and Lee Thompson on production here tonight as well, once again. And Andy, I think the big question has to be, as I mentioned, can anyone stop Will Redford? He's currently second fastest in qualifying, but given his form at Alton Park, that seemed quite ominous. Do you think he might be in the same sort of form tonight?
Yeah, good evening, Scott. Good evening, viewers. I mean, he was a class above the rest, Will Redford, in that first 3 opening rounds at Alton Park. Literally, even when he was started out in 10th place, took his time, and then picked off the drivers as they went through. But today's a little bit different. The track is super wide. We're using the shortened international layout in Silverstone, so the slipstream will be really strong around this track, and it's going to be a different sort of prospect for Will Redford. Also for the drivers, you know, it was a real baptism of fire for some of the drivers last week, being their first outing really on iRacing. So maybe you've got a little bit more practice here at Silverstone. And to add to their woes, I would say, is the new tyre model. I've been speaking to quite a few of the guys on iRacing, and the first lap is super treacherous. The tyres are really cold, and I suppose it's reenacting more real-life race driving. So these guys might be used to that.
Yeah, definitely so. We should mention first of all quickly, thanks very much for everyone's patience for us getting tonight's broadcast underway. There was a bit of a last-minute emergency update from iRacing that dropped at literally 7 o'clock. So a lot of the drivers have had to pretty much get themselves to sort that update out, wait for the servers to come back up. Once they have, to jump straight into qualifying on essentially, as you mentioned, Andy, a brand new time model, which they've only just had to get to grips with in the last roughly sort of 7 days or so. So how much? Everyone, of course, is going to be running on a slightly different baseline setup on top of that. So how tricky is that going to be, particularly for people from an iRacing perspective, when you switch from one essentially baseline setup to the next, or one time model to the next in terms of tweaks? How tricky is that for some drivers to adapt to that, given that it's not as simple as simply just going from one compound to another in real life racing? In the sim, a difference in time model can either have big or it can have small, it can have dramatic, it can have very minor changes. So how critical is it with the time model change? How much different do these drivers have to perform with this car, and what are the main challenges you think that some of these drivers are finding? You talked about them having quite cold tyres on the first lap, but is there anything else they're finding that's a challenge out there which some drivers might struggle with out there tonight?
Well, it's very much an understeery car anyway, so with the new tyre model, it just emphasises that fact, certainly in the opening 2 or 3 laps of this. Now, normal iRacers, they almost get, like you real-life racers as well, you get your muscle memory programmed to how the car drives. Then something changes drastically on the car, and it's almost like learning all over again. So it takes a little while for the drivers to get used to the changes, but everything I've heard so far is only positive. You know, it's more towards real life. I mean, you look at some of the races, and certainly the endurance races, although we haven't got that Roy here tonight, is that you could do 3 or 4 or 5 stints, and in the real world that's probably not realistic. So I think iRacing is really trying hard to get the realism into the racing, and we heard from quite a few of the drivers last time out and out on park of how similar iRacing was to actually driving the real car, and I think that's what really iRacing and obviously esports now has really come on leaps and bounds from maybe say 5-10 years ago, is that now it's realistic, so the drivers who have actually probably driven this track will have a real advantage over the drivers that don't.
It's a very, very good point. The season started last year for the real-world MX-5 drivers, for example, right here on the Silverstone International layout. This is the layout that we're using tonight, of course, here at the home of British Motorsport at Silverstone. 1.851 miles, 2.979 kilometres, 10 turns. They're not really going to get quite close to the 1 minute 2 second 2.731 lap record set by Liam Morley in a supercar. They're doing 1 minute 14, 1 minute 15s out there at the moment. But in terms of that muscle memory, that experience, I think you're absolutely right. Those will have raced it throughout the season. There were a couple of meetings this year at the Silverstone International Circuit, both kind of bookending the season. So drivers from series such as City Car Cup, Compact Cup and MX-5, which actually make up quite a lot of the bulk of the entry that we have in this Winter Esports Series anyway, will certainly know this series quite in and out. But you absolutely touched on a very good point that some of these drivers, like we spoke to Luke Herbert, for example, right at the end of the first set of esports races at Alton Park, when he was talking about how him and his team use iRacing as a training tool for his team to get used to the circuit, used to relatively some kind of baseline setup to understand it. And that just shows that, yes, iRacing has got quite a long-standing physics model and a long-standing engine in terms of how it's and software base that it's used for years on years. But the way in which it's developed, the way in which the guys at iRacing have kept on refining it and developing it over these last sort of 10 or so years, just shows how, one, how committed they are, and two, how adaptable it is to get it to that standard, and also as well how they've been able to progress it year on year and how it's able to really fully evolve. And they're always making changes and tweaks as it goes on. So these people who race in iRacing will have to keep adapting to those different changes to make it even more and more closer to the real thing. And that's a challenge, I think, for some drivers when they have to kind of get to grips with. I've always argued that it's easier for someone to go from the sim into real life than it is from real life into the sim. So some drivers who've been coming to this series who haven't esports raced or raced in a sim before at all might well be finding it a bit tricky, and some others who've been using iRacing for whatever reason for the last few seasons or whenever and are more grounded and more to grips with it than some others who might be using it for the first time, which sounds obvious, but it's a bit more complex than that sometimes.
Yeah, it definitely is, and we had quite a few of the drivers last week talking about their peripheral vision. You know, in a normal car, you can turn your head left and right, and you've got a real good field of vision. And it all depends on the setups. We talked to a few of the drivers after the race about what sort of setups they're racing on currently, and you know, a couple of them are sat at a desk in a rickety chair on a G20 wheel with one tiny screen in front of them, and then you've got probably the likes of Will Redford, because he is an iRacer anyway, been in quite a few Apex League. He'll have his triple setups with his force feedback wheel and his stable rig. So, you know, it is a sport that you can get into that's relatively cheap, but once you get into it, it can become costly, but I suppose it's certainly a lot cheaper than going to a track day at Silverstone for a full day. And in the comfort of your own home, like you're saying, in the current climate, it's probably a little bit warmer as well. But we're looking forward to these 3 races here tonight, 3 20-minute races ahead of us. Currently 14 minutes into the qualifying, and like you were saying before, Scott, Will Redford's not really had all the luck in this qualifying session. Currently sat down in third, extremely close between himself, Buell, and Higgins, currently leading out the qualifying sessions. But it's going to be a different prospect for Will today, and he's certainly going to have that bullseye on his car after all the rest of the drivers saw how well he did into the first round. So it's going to be an interesting night to see if Will can just handle the pressure that he's got on him, put on himself for being an iRacer, like you said. But for the other guys, it's really somebody to charge down and make a point that I can beat Will Redford at iRacing.
Yeah, it's going to be quite a task for them, particularly. I mean, as you mentioned, the likes of John Higgins and even Mikey Doble, who is this year's Compact Cup champion and who secured it at this circuit, although, ironically, he only really did one race, and the other two were spent chasing after the Ginetta GT5 title at Donington Park, which, incredibly, he also managed to pick up on the same weekend, literally the very same weekend. He raced in 2 different championships at 2 different circuits on the same weekend and wrapped up both titles, which is quite a feat in itself. We should, as I mentioned, talk about the qualifying session. Less than 5 minutes to go. It is John Higgins Jr. who currently has the fastest time on the board, 1 minute 14.900, only half a tenth ahead of Mikey Doble in second fastest. Then triple Alton Park race winner Will Redford is third. Tom Griffiths is fourth ahead of Jack Noller. Then it's Will Blackwell Chambers in sixth, Richard Jepp seventh, Richard Harwood eighth, and George Palozzi and the number 67 of Matt Kendall rounding out the top 10. So pretty close in there, and this is one of those circuits where, because it is a relatively simple layout, it's only 9 corners, it looks very much like a square or a rectangle, so there's lots of big braking zones here, lots of very key overtaking spots here. There's almost an overtaking opportunity at just about almost every corner on this circuit, so I'd imagine that compared to Alton Park, where it was twisty, it was narrow, it was a proper old school circuit, so too is Silverstone, of course, but it's been around for several years, for 70 plus years or so. But in terms of the different challenge it provides, it's got long straights, it's got wide sections of the circuit as well, so cars can go 3-4 abreast to some kind of corners. It might always be a clean outcome on the exit rather than on the entry, but in some cases it's going to be quite intriguing to see how these guys tackle that, and it might well produce a different kind of racecraft that's required here at Silverstone, given how wide and how non-technical it is in some cases compared to the twisty nature of Alton Park. So you might see some drivers here tonight possibly come alive here at Silverstone in a different way than which they didn't back at Alton Park, because this circuit might suit their racecraft and their driving style a little bit more than the twists and turns of Alton did.
Yeah, 100%. This is more of a technical race. I mean, the most crucial part of each of the races is going to be the first visit down into the village section of the track. You know, it's quite tight. It's a real tight right-hander. And with a field of over 25 drivers, we've got 34 drivers here tonight, all heading for that small part of the circuit. I'm envisaging we're going to see a few incidents and a few spinners around there. But it's also vital for the drivers because, like you were saying, you've got the really long straight here, you got the hangers straight, you literally come round turn 5 as if you were coming round Chapel, and then you've got the hangers straight in front of you. So it's all about getting that exit and onto that hanger straight perfect, because these cars do not like getting really slow and then trying to build up speed. It's all about momentum in these MX-5 cars. So it's more about smooth driving, making sure that your entry speed and exit speed is perfect to be able to do it. And where we may see a couple of drivers gaining places is if we see the fighting out on track. Because if they're fighting, they're not using the optimal line, and therefore they're going to be losing speed along the long straights. And with the slipstream effect in these cars, down the hanger straight is going to be a big advantage if somebody gets a really good exit over somebody who gets a poor exit, should we say.
Yeah, particularly with some of the slower corners that we've got here. Of course, we go to the village section, also go through Vale and Club as well. Those are going to be a couple of tricky sections where they're particularly hard braking zones. You can also class going to Stowe as well is something along those lines, although it's a slightly faster entry into that corner. It's quite a long corner, but you do carry quite a lot of speed through the apex and all the way through the exit as well. I should mention Will Redford was probably listening and tuning into us, because he's now just popped himself to the top of the times. He was ahead by a quarter of a second, but then Mikey Doble's brought that advantage down to a fraction under a tenth of a second. So Will Redford finding some ultimate pace to put himself on provisional pole, which is done with 1 minute 20 seconds to go on the clock in this qualifying session. See if we can a few more possible switches around in position. I don't think there has been too much, but in terms of possibly people that I would expect to get right up there, I think Alton Park was a good benchmark for some drivers to showcase what they could do in terms of their baseline performance. I think Silverstone will be a good chance to build on that. Some of these drivers since Alton Park will have had a couple of weeks to adapt themselves to iRacing, if that was their first ever sort of race, the first race in a while. And so they've had a chance to feel out the competition. Now they've had a good chance to get some laps in and get themselves prepared. I'm expecting possibly a few more drivers to get up there and make it a bit closer. And I think the fact that the Silverstone International Circuit, the layout, I think is lending itself to being a bit closer tonight, because if you look at how close the spread is, you can see the top 21 cars. You've got the top 21 cars covered by less than a second out there. The top 9 cars covered by less than half a second. So I imagine compared to Autumn Park, it's probably going to be a little bit tighter, although I think there's a little bit less a lat on screen. I'm sure Luke Herbert will probably appreciate that. Luke Herbert, of course, 3-time Mazda MX-5 champion. Quite a scary experience here at Silverstone on the national circuit once when he got tagged going down the pit straight. There's a great shot of his car literally facing 90 degrees right, facing towards the pit wall, with everyone else kind of charging at him down the pit straight after he got tagged. So I think less of that and more keeping it on the road is going to be something he'll be hoping for in a much better time, I'm sure.
Yeah, 100%. Really looking forward to these next 3 20-minute races. The first 2 are going to come at you thick and fast, a little bit of a 5-minute break, and then the last 20-minute sprint race into this. So tyres won't be an issue in this race, but obviously I'll hand it over to you, Scott, for the grid.
Yes, indeed. So, grid then for round 4 of the championship, race 1 tonight. And it is Will Redford, points leader, who starts on pole position on the front of the grid. Alongside him is Mikey Doble on the front row. It's George Palozzi with a good late effort to put him third, alongside John Higgins Jr. Then Tom Griffiths and Jack Noller make up the third row of the grid, ahead of Will Blackwell Chambers and Matt Kendall on row 4. And then Richard Jepp and Richard Harwood round out the top 10. Joseph Doble and Ben Craner then come next on the 6th row. And that's followed by Sam Smith and Keith Dalton on row 7. Row 8 is Rowan Lundy and Lee Britton, followed by 3-time MX-5 Super Cup champion Luke Herbert and Chris Etheridge. And it's Richard Wootton and Rob McGregor from rounding out the top 20. Then Matt Goddard and Jason Greatrex, Richard Bliss and John Pethick to complete the top 24 runners. Still, we flick through Richard Bliss and John Pethick. Simon Hutchins and Alex Port come next to them. Joel Argelez and James Riley, and Harry England and Stuart Bliss, Huell Rosenthal and Piers Chandler, and Robert Bannister and Nick Reindrod round out the 34 starters.
You can take a breath now, Scott. That's
and
quite
breathe.
a grid. And breathe.
Yeah, I might not get a chance to properly breathe, given it's going to be quite energetic here. In terms of the championship standings, before we get underway very quickly, Will Redford does lead the points after his 3 race wins. It's 304 points to Will Redford, ahead of Jack Noll on 286. He's tied with John Higgins in second place. George Pallotti currently sits in 4th, and Tom Griffiths and Joseph Doble. The Richard Harwood, Chris Etheridge, Will Blackwell Chambers, and Ben Craner. In fact, Blackwell Chambers, Craner, and Doble all tied on 224 points in a 3-way tie for 9th. Should be pretty close and pretty tight out there, as we've got, because there are 34 cars out there getting set for the first of 3 races here tonight at Silverstone. We're almost ready to get underway at the start. Watch for the lights that will come up on the top of the screen any moment now. And it's Will Redford on the right on pole position, with Mikey Doble alongside him on the front row. Here we go then, race number 4 of the season, round 4 of the BRSCC Winter Esports Series here at Silverstone is underway in a flurry of tyre smoke. And as expected, Will Redford gets a clean start from pole position. Mikey Doble tries to slot in behind him, but he might get the early challenge already down towards the first corner at Abbey from George Palozzi in the red number 49. They turn in through Abbey for the first time. Now, fingers crossed, we get through the first couple of corners okay, nice and clean. He says rather tentatively, so far they're all getting through all right. And they're already going side by side in towards the village complex. But it is Will Redford who's got through. I spoke too soon, didn't I? 1 or 2 cars getting around already. One car's lost it at 67. 67 is Matt Kendall. So he's dropped down towards the tail of the field already after a bit of contact. But heading onto the hangar straight for the first time, it's Will Redford who leads the way then. Mikey Doble in second place. John Higgins Jr. in third. Then Palozzi, Noller, Blackwell Chambers, Griffiths, Jepp, Craner and Dalton were top 10. And just as anticipated, I've seen this before in real MX-5 racing, already just getting up into a large league group of about 9 or 10 cars towards the front, heading out towards Stowe for the first time. But even so far, I say with fingers crossed rather tentatively, Andy, looking like quite civilised, but we've still got some 14 minutes to go to see if they're going to get around the rest of the race that way, or if it's going to kick off in the first few laps.
Yeah, 100%. It was a clean getaway. You can see a lot of drivers done a lot of practice at the start of the race. You know, every driver got away, bit of a tyre smoke, which you do normally get in these cars. But everyone getting away. Little slight incident there coming into Village. Oh, and it looks like we got a bit of a spinner there through Club. I'm not sure who that was. Alex Port? No, it wasn't.
I think it was on the Dobles. I think it was Joseph Doble in car 11. I saw that car tumbling down the timing screen. So he sets up at 26th position. So yeah, I think he might be the one that came a cropper on that one.
Yeah, it definitely is, but it's just starting to get their stride now. The tyres are getting up to temperature, and then we'll really start seeing the pushes on from these drivers. Like we said, we've only got 15-minute races, so it's literally fast and frenetic in these races, and you really don't want to be losing the slipstream. Certainly down this hanger straight, well, Redford's got a bit of a decent gap, but we'll see the power of that slipstream. It was close to nearly half a second. It's come down to 3 tenths now, 2 tenths, and you can see it all coming down really fast. You're looking there at Jep at the back, just trying to make a move onto Griffiths as they come around Stowe for the second time here, but you can sort of see the power of that slipstream already coming down that hanger straight.
Yeah, so a leading group of 6 already started to break away here. That's Jason Greytrex, who knocks into the back of John Pethick, this year's vice champion in the MX-5 Clubman Championship this year. But the leading few 6 cars go through. Blackwood Chambers has made the move on Jack Noller, who, but he's not racing in this series, is also Williams esports racer as well, and races in the MX-5 Championship as well. He was one of the top drivers in rookie drivers in the season 2022. So good to see him showing him he's in a maybe slightly more natural environment, being in sim racing. But he's one of the drivers that's come from sim racing into real world and adapted very quickly, having raced with Martin Tolley's Go For It racing outfits. At the end of the second lap and across the line, Redford leads it from Mikey Doble in second place, and it's Higgins, Palozzi, Blackwood Chambers up to 5th, so he's got ahead of Jack Noller on that lap, and it's Griffiths, Jet, Britton, and Dalton Harwood are getting amongst each other. This is the battle we're looking at here. This is really based on the top 10 then, between Dalton, Harwood, Ben Crane is in here too, so is Sam Smith. So Sam Smith, who's a double MX-5 Super Cup champion himself, and Keith Dalton, either he got tagged or got a bit of a spin there, but there are cars every which way on the exit at the far corner. There goes Sam Smith's car, just shooting back into shot. Still a bit over-exuberant, I think, after Silverstone. We thought after a couple of weeks the way they've managed to calm down a bit, but in some cases, 1 or 2 drivers just trying to feel themselves out in the first couple of laps and getting a little bit too close for comfort out there.
Yeah, that's the problem as well. When the cars are so close, if one car makes a slight mistake, it almost causes a ripple effect down the field. We saw it out in Alton Park. This one on the exit there of turn 5 coming onto the hanger straight, slight mistake, and then it just caused the concertina effect down the field coming down there. But we have got a few drivers that have been in the pits already. I think this is Jack Noller, who as we looked was in the top 3 of the championship, coming into the pits with a bit of damage on his car there. But Will Redford at the front at the moment. Well, Mikey Doble went in second place there, Higgins in third, but you can sort of see Redford manages to pull like 0.4 of a second coming up to the hanger straight. Then Mikey Doble just manages to come down to 2 tenths by the end going into Stowe. He needs to try and keep on the tails of Will Redford coming into this part of the circuit, and then he'd be able to make that move coming down into Stowe. But at the moment, Will Redford is still managing to keep out in front over Mikey Doble in second place.
He's trying to break the toe on the run down towards Stowe Corner. He was trying to not allow Mikey Doble to get too close. We have got this leading group of 4 cars there, covered by about roughly 1.2 seconds. Now, I'm intrigued to see what's happened to Will Blackwood Chambers, because I'm not sure if the reason why Jack Noller went into the pit lane was because he made contact with Will Blackwood Chambers, trying to repass him for 5th position. Will now finds himself under attack from both Tom Griffiths and this man, Richard Jepp, who makes the switch back as he goes through in through Vale in the first part of the club. Now, Will try and fight back here around the outside, heading back onto the pit straight, and as this battle goes on, his fellow MX-5 Super Cup racer, Tom Griffiths, is going to try and get away here, because his target now is to try and pull away from these 2 cars behind and start to catch up with the top 4 who are in a race of their own. They're covered by 1.1 seconds as we head on to another lap. And I'm still going side-by-side for position 4. That's that 6th place, Richard Jepp, who was this year's driver who took his the team Met Motorsport to the Student Motorsport title within the City Car Cup, but they're in 6th position. We've got a couple of replays coming up here to see what happened a little bit further back and a little bit earlier on in the race. This is what happened, I think, this is with Matt Kendall. This is further back in car 6-7. This is at the start here. So heading towards the complex at the village. Tries to turn. Oh, he lost it by himself and left Joseph Doble and others with nowhere to go. Sam Smith was caught up in that as well, but they all managed to get away relatively unscathed, apart from, whoops, Matt Kendall didn't. There was more contact there. And this is Huell Rosenthal that had the spin also, as he got going too.
Yeah, that looks like it's coming out onto Stowe, is that? Or was that down? I can't tell what that was there. It's whatever it is he spun it around. I'm sure we get it here. No, there we go. It's many angles there of Hi, Rosenthal, just spinning his car around the wrong way on the track, and it's just so easy to do. I mean, we saw there the first one coming into the village. I mean, that's the problem. Oh, as we see Jamie Riley just getting it super wrong, coming out of the last corner, hitting that treacherous curb on the inside, and literally just sliding across and hitting the wall there as we rejoin back with the live racing here. Will Redford still out in lead, but look at the gap now. 0.1 of a second to Mikey Dougal in second place, but Higgins behind is right on the tail as well. So these three are in a long train, and Mikey is in the perfect position to try and optimize on that slipstream. So really needs to just tuck up behind the back of Will Redford's car, and we can just see the gap there closing all the time. Will playing defensive on the inside here into Stowe. Mikey's just going to try to get the move done around the outside, thinks better of it, and just bides his time. But certainly you can just see the power of that slipstream with these four cars. But he comes back alongside him here. Will's really going defensive into the second half, coming into the latter half of this track here, and they are side by side here. Dougal's got the inside line, so should be able to get this move done. Oh, it hits the curb, goes really high, loses a lot of momentum, and that was talking about earlier on. As soon as you hit that curb, look how much momentum he has lost back out to nearly 4/10 of a second, Will Redford. But Will Redford will know now that Mikey Dougal does mean business in this round.
Yeah, Mikey Dougal turning his MX-5 into a bike momentarily there, putting it up on the two wheels. That was pretty extreme. Last time I saw someone do that at a BRSCC weekend, it was in a Fiesta Junior car. That was at Snetterton. He was very lucky to get away with that one, but Mikey Dougal getting very close and showing that he means business just as much as Will Redford does right now. And so, of course, too, are both Higgins and Pelosi. Now, those four have pulled away quite substantially from the next group of cars, which is Richard Jett at a hard-charging Lee Britton. He's up to 6th position. Now, but here they are then, as the weather conditions got a little bit more overcast here in this first race. So it was quite bright, but now the conditions, the sun's gone back behind the clouds here. It's now Lee Britton, who is really charging now, has got past Will Blackpool Chamber, but has now put himself alongside Richard Jett down the hanger straight. These two going side by side for 5th, and here goes Will Blackpool Chambers thinking, I fancy a piece of this. Let's make it 3 abreast down towards Stowe. So it's Jett on the outside, WBC on the middle, and Lee Britton on the inside sees them both off. Gets a little bit twitchy to the apex of Stowe corner, but on the exit, he's got the momentum, and now Jeff is not quite ready to give up that 6th position. He's still fighting hard with Blackpool Chambers. Rest of the top 10 behind them has got McGregor in 8th position, Richard Wooden in 9th, and then it's Chris Etheridge in 10th position, but they're still going side by side. Now, as Jeff gets the position back again, here comes Blackpool Chambers trying to take 2 for the price of 1 through the second part of the club, and now as he gets the toe, a little bit of help here from Jeff. He's now in the prime position here to push himself alongside and back past Lee Britton. These three, of course, battling quite hard, but it's as you said earlier on, Andy, because these cars, they can fight amongst each other, but the easier it is now, of course, for these cars that are trying to catch up to the leading top 4. It's easy for those 4 to try and keep on getting away. They're ahead by 7-8 seconds, and well, that was almost inevitable there. I think Richard Jeff is trying to wait against Lee Britton, just appears back in the shot there. That was probably getting a little bit too close. Obviously, I'm certain there was no malice involved between either driver there. It was simply just 2 drivers going for the same piece of tarmac, and it didn't really work out. What that has now done is brought McGregor, Wooden and Britton into the mix now here, whilst Paul Blackpool Chambers is looking experienced, thinking, where's everyone gone? I'm in P5 and I'm out here on my own.
It certainly is. Just looking further back down the field. Oh, we've got to change it for the lead at the moment. Will Redford and Dougal are battling out. Mikey's got that inside line. I think Higgins is going to get through as well. Side by side there. Will Redford has the inside line, but really needs to stay off that curb. And again, Mikey Dougal hits that curb, which will lose a bit of momentum. And Will might be able to come back down Hamilton straight here, coming into Abbey as we look on board with Will Redford right onto the back of Mikey Dougal's car here. And he's alongside here coming into Abbey. Going to have the outside. He's very technical minded because what he's trying to do is get the inside for the next corner here and trying to get the move done. Great racing out between these two, giving each other loads of space on track to make the move. But Will Redford is still behind, but pushing so hard to get that first position back. But he just needs to bide his time. He's got the hanger straight coming up where he could possibly make the move, but trying to maybe force a mistake there from Mikey in first place.
Yeah, I tell you what, both John Higgins Jr. and George Pelosi getting the pound seats here, watching these two go at it back and forth. It's fantastic stuff for the lead. And here comes Higgins now, trying to get 2 for the price of 1 down towards Stowe here. As Redford does the tactic of squeezing to the inside line and switching right back to the outside to get the run through the corner. Doble just clips the curb on the inside through Stowe, just trying to run him out wide over the curb, saying, anything you could do, Fred? Well, I can do it just as watch. Have some of that for your own size. Here comes John Higgins Jr. thinking, can I come and play as well? He's almost up the inside of Doble. He goes sailing around the outside to try and get back past of a lead. There's still almost touching wing mirrors here. Now as they come up through the second part to end another lap, there's only about roughly 3.5 minutes to go on the clock here. Redford runs out wide. Doble's got the momentum, he's got the track position with his nose just in front by literally 25 1,000th of a second. They're back in towards Abbey Corner this time. We're not quite side by side. Now, scratch that, they are side by side once again, just as they were a lap ago. There's some slightly wider approach to Redford over the curves. He gets his nose back in front. Higgins is watching on way. Also, is George Palozzi. Little twitch on the brakes and Doble. He's going to get the turn in on the apex, and they're still side by side for the lead. Doble edges him out again, gets his nose in front once more, and he's back into the lead once more with about 3 minutes to go. But I have a feeling here, Andy, these four are going to keep carrying on all the way to the checkered flag as they carry on. Quick checking with the rest of the top 10 very quickly. Will Blackwell Chambers is still in 5th on his own now by about 1.4 seconds. It's now McGregor versus Jepp in their own battle for 6th. Here they are coming onto the hangar straight. So McGregor 6th, Jepp in 7th. Then we see Richard Wharton 8th, Lee Britton 9th, who's recovering, and Rowan Lundy rounding out the top 10. The white car there was Jack Noller, who's recovered off the pits. There's a good look at the internals of Richard Jepp's MX-5. He heads down towards Stowe Corner, getting almost closer than close down towards the right-hander. But looking pretty fast and frantic with less than 3 minutes to go here. It is all action in the top 10. They haven't got that long to go to settle who gets what in these first 3 races, as these 4 are still over each other. And they're just surviving a bit of a lap back. Marcus having a spin there, so that would have been a heart palpitation for somebody. As they come off the pit straight with just under 2.5 minutes to go, it could be anyone's race from these top 4.
Yeah, it definitely is. Palozzi hasn't shown his cards yet at the moment. Quite happy to just sit in 4th place to let these front 3 try and battle it out. Maybe hoping for a little bit of an incident, because we've seen Dougal and Redford pretty much side by side for many a lap, to be fair. Higgins is just trying to put his nose in there to see what he can do, but looking further back the field, we got here Chris Everidge in 12th place, having a good battle with another Double, not Mikey Double, but Joseph Double there in 11th place. So these mini pocket battles in these MX-5s are absolutely brilliant throughout the field. And, you know, what really keeps them together is this slipstream effect that the cars have. It's really hard for the front driver to get away, which promotes some really good racing. But look back at the front of the field. Redford has managed to take the #1 spot. Again, Mikey Double in 2nd, literally all over the back. Higgins, Palozzi at the moment still not showing their cards, just letting these front 2 battle it out. But Higgins will have to make his move very shortly as we go into the final minutes, or pretty much, they might get one more lap there as we see Real go really wide, giving the opportunity and open the door to Mikey Double. So it is literally on anyone's call. Oh, as we nearly have contact between the front 2, and this may give an opportunity here for John Higgins. Overspeed coming around here into the first corner into Abbey, but doesn't quite get it done. But look how compact the top 4 are in this final round.
Yeah, this is pretty close. I think we're on to the final lap now. There's less than 50 seconds to go here. So pretty much, if anyone's going to make the move, it's going to be now. And there's contact. Redford gets hit into the back by John Higgins Jr. He's been shuffled back to 4th because of that. And that might be a penalty later on, or maybe a bit of a protest. But Redford now is now off the podium at this point after having led for so long. And now Mikey Doble leads them onto the back straight for the final time. There's back markers in front as well, but we can see Will Redford, who's immediately going back onto the attack here on the back of George Palozzi, down towards Stowe Corner for the final time. Let's see if we can line him up for a podium place here. It looks as though at the moment Doble might be high and dry up in the lead here. Here comes Redford. He gets squeezed to the inside down towards Stowe Corner. Palozzi breaks that tiny bit later, but with better speed and momentum through the corner, Redford goes through. Tiny twitch of oversteer, but he manages to hold on for sorry, it's 15 minutes plus 1 lap, I think it is, isn't it? So they're going to get possibly 1 more lap after this. Down towards the complex for the... No, it will be the checker pad this time, forgive me. So up to the final couple of the corners they go. And as hard as John Higgins Jr. will try and push, it's going to be a victory coming through the final few corners here at Silverstone in race #1 for Mikey Doble, who takes victory in the first race of the evening here at Silverstone International in the BRSCC Winter Esports Cup. It's 2nd for John Higgins Jr. and 3rd for Will Redford in the end. He only just got past Palozzi by about a second or so. As they come towards the line, Will Blackwell Chambers 5th. A little bit of argy-bargy between both McGregor and Jepp there. McGregor only just beat his line by about roughly 41,000ths of a second. So that was pretty close between those two in their top 10 positions. It's going to be 8th for Richard Wharton, 9th for Lee Britton after he recovered after the contact earlier on. That's a good comeback drive for him. And then Rowan Lundy, who usually we see racing in a Toyota Celica in the Club Sport Trophy, comes through to round out the top 10. The rest of the field coming through in their droves. There goes Harry England, finishing 24th. He's one of our sole Fiesta Junior racer who's in the field. We'll be back out next year for more FJC antics, but quite a hectic fight at the front between those first four. I imagine that Will Redford will feel quite hard done by the contact. I'm certain, obviously, that John Higgins Jr., that was completely obviously non-intentional, just missed his breaking point a little bit, and that's what seems sort of met the contact. I'm sure he'll be quite apologetic afterwards, but Mikey Doble and co certainly proving that Will Redford is not the man to dominate this race, the championship so far, because of course he might have had the runaway victories at Alton Park, but here at Silverstone, that pack has caught up, and they've caught up substantially.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's sort of that neutraliser, that slipstream effect that the drivers are getting around this track. And being such a wide track, like you were saying earlier on, there's so many opportunities to make the passing move. But what a great battle between Mikey Doble, John Higgins, Will Redford, and George Pelosi was maybe the rear gunner in that group of four. Didn't really show his cards at all in that first round. It was mainly down to them three. Obviously a mistake going into the village on the last lap. And, it was... unfortunately, Will come off the worst coming through the final corner or through Village that lost all the momentum. And like I said, momentum in these cars is key, and he couldn't make up the ground there. Back to Mikey Doble and John Higgins on that final straight.
Yeah, just finishing the last couple of cars coming across the line, but here are the results from race number one. Then Mikey Doble picks up the victory about just under half a second from John Higgins in second place, and Will Redford, after battling for the lead and leading for so long in that race, has to end up on the last step of the podium. He will certainly bounce back with vigour in race number two coming up very shortly. George Pelosi fourth, then Will Blackwell Chambers fifth, some further 6 seconds back. Then it's Rob McGregor sixth, Richard Jepp seventh, Richard Wooden eighth, and Lee Britton and Ryan Lundy rounding out the top 10. And it's Joseph Doble 11th from Chris Etheridge, Jason Greatrex putting in a fighting drive to 13th, John Pethick, Richard Harwood, Sam Smith, who's recovered well after his spin, 16th, and Goddard and Bliss. And I think we're already getting ready for race number two. So just as we saw race number one finish, straight into race number two, so no time to delay. And underway for race number two here tonight at Silverstone in the BRSCC Winter Esports Series. And from pole position, courtesy of his race one victory, Mikey Doble will lead them in towards Abbey for the first time, and certainly not hanging around either. This is now familiar territory to what we saw at the end of race number one. It's Higgins versus Redford again, this time for second place. I wonder what Higgins' braking is going to be like this time. Well, he's going to be under threat here, possibly from George Pelosi, and also quite fast starting Will Blackwell Chambers, who's maintained his fifth place, and he's in there quite quickly. First few couple of cars going through, it looks as though everyone seems to be getting through sort of okay. Oh, again, I think there's one or two cars going a little wide in the background, but apart from that, most people are getting through just about unscathed. I see a flurry of tyre smoke. Looks like one of the blisters has gone around, so one or two little mishaps on this first couple of laps, but relatively clean on this opening lap so far. Meanwhile, Will Redford has got the sting shot off of the right hand onto the hanger straight, and he's not hanging around at all. He's straight onto the rear bumper of Mikey Doble. I have a feeling here, Andy, this is quite deja vu. This is going to be race one all over again. It's kicking off already at the beginning of race number two.
100%, and I don't know what Doble and Redford have put in their fuel tanks, but they've already managed to get a second lead over Higgins in third place. As we saw in that first race, Higgins was right in the mix of the battle, coming second overall, but at the moment the front two are well out in front in this early parts of the race. But oh no, we see their car number 19, James Riley, hitting that curb, and that sausage curb on the entry into that corner is absolutely treacherous. He hit it. We saw it earlier on with Mikey Doble literally going on to two wheels doing a stunt car move in the previous race, and it's just such a massive corner, and it's like that in real life, I would imagine as well, Scott. You probably know more than me, but I've seen it a few times. The car's in there. Oh, as we see a car nearly take out Jason Greatrex there. It was Chris Etheridge in car number 326 in P15, nearly causing a little bit of a pile up there.
I don't know about Chris, but I think Jason Greatrex was the one that was hashtag blessed there, because he just about got away with that one, and round goes. No, they're not teammates, they're just in the same livery, but the two cars with identical liveries have managed to find each other on track, but not in the way they're expecting. So Alex Port is the one going around for a spin. I think it might be Matt Kendall or someone else that was the other one that had to spin. Meanwhile, Will Redford, to no one's surprise, almost has gone to the lead of the race, already ahead of Mikey Doble. That gap says about 0.3 per second. Doesn't look like that to me. It looks a bit closer than that. And Higgins down to third. The difference now between race one and race two is that we've got a fifth incumbent in the lead group, and that's Will Blackwell Chambers. So the lead group separated by about 2 seconds or so. There's Matt Goddard in car number 18. He's got the recovering Chris Etheridge, who we saw his car almost kamikazing its way into the village complex, and one that was very lucky with that was Jason Greatrex as they come into the pit straight. So the end of lap number two then, Redford leads, Doble in second place, and it's Higgins, Pelosi and Blackwell Chambers in that lead group. Then there's a gap of about 2 seconds to lead Britain back in sixth, ahead of Joseph Doble in seventh place, McGregor in eighth, and it's Lundy and Richard Wooden rounding out the top 10. big battle going on here is towards the second half of the top 20. You've got the likes of Tom Griffiths, Luke Herbert, Ben Crane is in there as well, Chris Etheridge also in there too, Matt Goddard, lots of scrapping amongst each other here in this mid-pack. We come towards the kink here and onto the right-hander, and Chris Etheridge has lost it again. Off the rail he goes, around he goes, sideways into the path of Tom Griffiths. We got to the side of Jason Graytrex. Luke Herbert just passed 3 or 4 cars and says, cheers boys, I'll take 3 or 4 free passes any day of the week. Meanwhile, these two still won't leave each other alone. It's Redford versus Doble again, round 27. They've been going at it all leading so far, and I'm certain that will continue for the rest of the event. John Higgins Jr. holding station in 3rd place from Pelosi and Blackwell Chambers. So it seems as though that it's the same 4, roughly 5 drivers who were in effectively the best performing race number 1. Showcase it again in the early stages of race number 2. There's plenty of action going on mid-pack as well. So lots to focus on already in this first few minutes of this race.
Yeah, it's really an advantage of being at the front end of the grid, though. You get yourself out of what is the bottleneck part of that first lap going into Village, which will really slow up the mid-pack field. So it's going to be interesting on this 3rd race because the top 10 get inverted. So Redford, Dougal and Higgins, Pelosi and Blackwell Chambers will all be role reverse with... at the moment holding that 10th position is Richard David. So it's going to be interesting, like it was in Alton Park for the 3rd race, to see if the front runners that have dominated race 1 and at the moment dominating race 2 are able to make that transition to being in the back end of the top 10 to be able to make that position. But looking back on track at the moment, looking at the 6th place, Lee Britton coming around Stowe here, closely followed by Joseph Dougal in 7th place and McGregor in 8th place. So he's having a little bit of a battle, and like we say, getting a close and inside intimate view of what these Mazdas look like on the iRacing platform.
Yeah, I never knew that there was such an intricate view of the front brake calipers of that MX-5, but you just got that there looking at the back of front Joseph Doble's car on the rear of Lee Britton. Now, I'm certain that Lee Britton and co will have a good chance to catch up to the top 5, provided they can stop battling amongst each other too hard and possibly start to work together here to close up to them as they come up through Abbey Corner once again. Also in there too is the orange and black car, Rob McGregor, so watch out for him in 8th position. Lundy and Richard Wolf round out the top 10. And there's that huge battle going on further back, which is the likes of Harwood, Craner, Herbert, Noller, Graytrex, Goddard in that group of cars, so watch out for them too. McGregor thumps the curb as he heads onto the little link here onto the hangar straight. We go on board with Rob then in the HSR machine. Ooh. And so someone else has gone around. Who was that? Was that Lee Britton going around? I think it might have been. McGregor clips the wall as well. I think it might have been Lee Britton going for a spin. I'm not sure if he made contact with somebody, but there was somebody that had a spin there. And let's see who it was. I think it was, yes, it was Lee Britton. He's gone down to quite far down the order, it seems. No, he's carried on, so somebody else has had a spin somewhere. Redford still leads Doble in 2nd place. I think it might have been a back marker that had the spin, and possibly cars had to scatter to try and avoid him out of that one. But as they come now through out of Club Corner and onto the pit straight again, as we head towards half distance in this second race, Redford still in control here, but not being allowed to get away and charge like he did at Alton Park. He's being kept honest all the way, and the likes of Doble and Higgins Jr. and Pelosi and Blackwell Chambers just making sure they're keeping him in sight here and just capitalising, as they did in race 1, for any mistake or mishap that might happen. It's in many cases, even though Doble had just as good, if not slightly better pace in some cases than Will Redford, he was there to capitalise when Redford had contact with Higgins Jr. and he came through to win. So there's a good chance here, if he could play his cards right here, he might do well. There's one Doble that changes for the lead, another one passes for 10th position, so past Richard Wotton goes Joseph Doble. So the Dobles in good form so far, 2 of them, or both of them at least in this race, in the top 10 already so far.
Yeah, and at the moment Joseph Doble is in that pole position for race 3 if he can manage to hold on to that P10, but I'm pretty sure that Richard David behind him in P11 will have a lot to say about that. But looking at the big mover in the pack is probably Jack Nolo. We saw him in the first race having a little bit of an incident that literally led him to go into the pits. Currently in 3rd place in the championship, I believe it was, or 2nd. So we know he's a very fast driver, just trying to make a recovery drive after that. Currently in P13th at the moment, so he's managed just to pick another position over Lee Herbert there. So can he manage to get back up into that P10th at the moment for that reverse grid probe? It might be a bit of a tall order, but like you say, if these cars in front of him continue to battle, that enables him to close up the gap. But looking back out in front, it's the two usual suspects, Redfall and Dougal, just battling out and literally glued together, as they have been for the majority of the first race and the 8 minutes of this race at the moment. Higgins can't get a look in. He's still round about that 0.9 to 1 second gap, so he's not really been able to close down. So the front two at the moment sort of playing ball with each other and not trying to do some ambitious moves coming into corner. So they're able to establish that gap of 1 second between John Higgins Jr. behind it in third place with George Pelosi in fourth. So sort of neutralising the effect from behind, but really gearing up again for an epic finish to this second race, Redford and Dougal.
Yeah, we're starting to pull away a little bit from the cars in third, fourth and fifth. These cars aren't pulling away from each other though. This is Rowan Lundy's having a scrap with Richard Harwood by the looks of it, and this is over... no, is that Rowan Lundy? That might be a slowdown penalty, I think, for Rowan Lundy, because he's now just lost a few spots. They're going for the complex. So he was in 8th, but I think he's dropped back a few places because he might get himself a slight penalty for extending track limits a bit too much. So he's got some work to do now, having slipped back to 10th. You're absolutely right, talking about the biggest mover in the field, that being Jack Noller, who's made up 14 places where he started. Who started back in 2017. He's currently 13th. The biggest driver that lost out so much, for those who are still running, I would count Chris Etheridge because he's lost 20 places, but for those who are still running, the biggest loser of positions is actually Sam Smith. He started in 16th, has lost 12 places down to 28th, and also another one who's lost quite a few is Richard Jepp. He started in 7th on the grid, and he has slipped down to 18th, so lots going on, more smoke going in front. Somebody's had a spin or a lock up somewhere, but this is now Jack Noller, who's in the wheel tracks of Ben Craner, who's the very impressive young Scottish driver who has raced a few things out there in motorsport the last few seasons, but this year particularly was racing for the Oxford Brookes team within the Student Motorsport Challenge, which runs within the City Car Cup, and won a race outright for a Student Motorsport team up at Croft, to absolute delight for him and his guys. So shout out to all the Oxford Brookes team and Ben for a fantastic job. But at the moment, Jack Noller putting on the perfect move there, making his move up the inside and then just neatly parking the car right on the apex, so any momentum Ben had off the corner had to be completely taken away, and he had to hit the brakes to make sure he didn't slam into the back of Jack's car. And also now slotting into position behind them is Luke Herbert, who's running 14th, but the 3-time MX-5 Super Cup champion, certainly putting all his expertise to good use. Quick check-in with the leaders as we keep on watching this battle here between Joseph Doble and looks like Richard Woodson. It's still Redford ahead of Doble, but the gap between them is literally about 0.13 of a second. They're practically side by side of nose to tail at the moment. But yes, here they are onto the hangar straight once again. They run over the curbs next. Redford very wide as he comes onto the hangar straight. This will give the perfect chance for Doble to slot in and get past. Here he goes to the inside line. And with a better straight line momentum, he'll have the inside run towards Stowe Corner to retake the lead here and go for 2 from 2 here at Silverstone. He goes down towards the right-hander, squeezes Redford right to the edge of the circuit. Says, right, this is my racing line. If you want to come past me, either slot back in behind and try again, or go around the outside, sunshine. He has to chooses the former option as well. Little tap in the rear, thinking, right, anything you can do, I can try and do it just as well. Looks like these two are pretty evenly matched as they turn in through Vale, over the curb and in through the first part of Club. Keeping the guys behind, the likes of Higgins Jr. and Pelosi and Will Blackwell Chambers all in the mix as well, as we come onto the pit straight here with roughly around about 3.5 minutes to go. And it really is all about Doble versus Redford for the lead here as they head back down towards Abbey Corner. These two glued together practically as they head back onto the first corner for another lap.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's going to be either taken down to a mistake like we saw in the first race, or it's going to be that slipstream effect coming down Hangar Straight is going to be the telling moment of this second race. But Noller at the moment is trying to get himself, he's currently in P12, but from 7th all the way down to 11th, they're all closely compact. You can see in the timing tower the gaps between there. You've got Harwood in 7th. And then 2 seconds back, you've got Doble. Then you've got a couple of seconds, David McGregor, Lundy. Noller about 3 seconds behind Lundy at the moment. Just needs them 2 positions to put himself back in a favourable position for race number 3. We've seen he's got the speed, managing to get through the field after that terrible spin in the first race. And to really save his day, I think he needs to be able to get back into that top 10 to get that reverse grid pole, or even higher if he can, to sort of save his day. But looking further at the front, we're looking at George Pelosi at the moment in his usual position of P4, but under a lot of pressure there from Blackwell Chambers in the number 1 MX-5 behind him. Just looking back, George just there 2 seconds behind John Higgins, so really lost them front three at the moment. So really probably just hoping that he can secure 4th place as they start again coming down into the village section there. Blackwell Chambers Smith just lining him up, I think, for a really good exit out of these next corner to try and get the passing move done down the Hanger Straight.
Yeah, about 2 laps to go now in this race, so still heading onto the Hanger Straight now once more. And looks down because Pologi has dropped back a little bit here. He's now to clutch the Blackwall Chambers. He might start to give him a chance to make a move. Meanwhile, Redford is trying to break the toe in front to try and prevent any chance that Doble might have to repass him for the lead. And Higgins has gone with them as well. So John Higgins Jr. in the black and blue car is there as Doble makes the big dive up the inside in towards Stoke corner. Really throws up the inside, makes contact and elbows Redford out wide. He won't appreciate it being nudged that wide twice in 2 races. And now comes Higgins down the outside line, possibly 2nd place. He's now going toe-to-toe into the apex at Vale. Almost clips over the curb, but he just squeezes him out here, and Higgins thinks, right, I don't want to make contact like I did in race 1. I'm going to sit back here and look for my opportunity a little bit. And he's done just that. He lost a little bit of momentum as they come off the pit straight. I think was going to start the last lap of the race. Meanwhile, casually 3 wide out of Stone. This is Luke Herbert battling with Jack Noller and Ben Craner. These 3 going right at it, and Noller slots him in between both cars just as he gets into the brakes and just about avoids contact with Ben Craner hitting the back of his car and him going to the back of Luke Herbert. Back to the leaders. They know it's the last lap of the race now. They're 3 abreast in towards the complex at the village. Out through the right-hander, Redford sliding into the back on the bumper of Doble. Here comes Higgins again to try and get past. If he can get a toe from both of them, he might get 2 for the price of 1 and go from 3rd to 1st. On towards the back straight now for what possibly might be the final time here. And he's Higgins in the best possible spot. He will get a double toe from both cars here down towards Stoke corner. And now Doble also trying to break the toe here. He goes left, he goes right. But Redford is right in his wheel tracks. They come down towards the right-hander at the end of the back straight. They're wheel-to-wheel, side-by-side. Here comes Redford. Can he get this? Get sailing around the outside to make this move stick. This Higgins had the momentum to go through as well. He might get a little bit blocked here with Redford tries to create a gap. He's nibbling on the rear bumper of Doble's car. And here comes Higgins to the inside line. Here comes Higgins to second for the lead. In fact, possibly down the inside line. There's contact. He's tagged Doble. Round goes the 88. Off into the gravel he goes. You won't appreciate that too much, but Doble's another one, so Higgins getting involved in more contact again. That'd be a bit of conversation with the stewards. Meanwhile, to the checkered flag after a frenetic final lap once again. Will Redford comes home to take victory in race number 2 of the evening here at Silverstone. It's Higgins in 2nd place, Pelosi 3rd, Blackwood Chambers 4th, and Mikey Doble, who will feel very much aggrieved after that final lap contact, has to end up with 5th position. It's Lee Britton 6th. Harwood Doble, more contact on the final lap of the last corner. That's Ben Crane attacking the rear of Luke Herbert, and round goes the 3-time MX-5 Super Cup champion. I don't know if he kept it off the wall, but the fact his car's possibly got some left rear damage suggests potentially not. So it really was kicking off on that last lap. Let's just look at this last couple of replays. Let's look at this here, Andy. Higgins gets the run, but then looks like he tries to be a bit too ambitious coming down towards the final couple of corners. Yeah,
100%. He tries to probably put his car into a gap that wasn't there, thinking that he could possibly get that race win, which would have been an amazing move if he could have got it done, but unfortunately clipped the back end of Mikey Doble. Mikey came around, spun around there, and obviously was on for 1st position. Was in a prime spot as well. Pretty much had it. Look at this. You can just see on board there, trying to fit himself down into a gap that really probably wasn't there. Nearly took out Will Redford as well, so he could have taken 2 for 1 there and got an unorthodox race win, but that's certainly one for the stewards there.
Yeah, he did make tag. He did contact on both of those. But he survives to live another day. Let's quickly rattle through this result here, because of course race 3 will be coming underway very, very shortly with the top 10 reverse. So Will Redford starts on pole. So Redford wins the race, and John Higgins in 2nd place. Then Pelosi, Blackwell Chambers, Mikey Doble in 5th. We feel quite aggrieved at that. Then Britton, Harwood, Joseph Doble, McGregor, and Richard Wootton rounding out the top 10. Then Lundy, Craner, Noller, Herbert still finished 14th despite the contact on the last corner. Then Jet, Pethick, Greatrex, and Harry England up to 18th, the Fiesta Junior racer. Then it's from 19th downwards, Hutchings, Riley, Dalton, the Blissy Stewart ahead of Richard, then Kendall, Port, Sam Smith, Rosenthal, and Joel Argalis in 28th, then Bannister, Etheridge, Grindrod, Goddard, Griffiths, and Chandler rounding out the 34. We lost a couple of cars towards the end. I don't think I've ever run through a result as fast as that, because given how we've quickly been rattling through the sessions, given the slightly later start.
Yeah, got a bit of break here though, Scott. You rattle through that like a machine gun, and obviously we got a 5-minute practice for the drivers, probably just to calm down a little bit after 2 frenetic races. I mean, Two different stories there. Will Redford getting hit on that first race. I think he finished fourth in that. And then we saw Mikey Doble there getting hit, literally coming into Vale. Literally could see the finish line in front of him, spins it round and gets in fifth place. So this last race is really going to be one to watch out at the Royal. Unfortunately, Jack Noller, with getting into a little bit of a battle towards the end, wasn't able to get into that top 10 position to get that reverse good roll. But I mean, great two races. I mean, a complete change from Alton Park, the tight corners, quite technical track. This is wide, which really promotes the drivers trying to make moves. But I think we saw there probably a little bit too hard for that third place driver to try and get that first place overall into Vale there. But I mean, some great two races we got ahead, and we got one more to go.
We have, and usually the reverse grid races in any championship signals that it gets pretty feisty out there, with drivers making their way through from deeper in the grid than they would normally be, especially those that have been up towards the front all evening. So when you've got the likes now of Will Redford, Mikey Doble, and others, John Higgins Jr., George Palozzi, and Will Blackwell Chambers that have been up in that front group of 4 or 5 cars all evening, when you push them back a little bit further, I think might well see them just have to pick their way through a little bit to work a little bit harder to try and get themselves a victory. It is one apiece between Will Redford and Mikey Doble tonight, so let's see if anyone can break the deadlock, or if we are going to get our 4th different winner from 6 races, which would be quite impressive given that we had the triple header knockout from, or the TKO should we say, from Will Redford at Alton Park. So whether or not he can take what will be a 5th win of the season, or whether it will be Doble's 2nd, or somebody else will pick up their 1st. It all depends on how this last race shakes out, which you can see some great aerial shots here of the virtual representation of Silverstone, of course the home of British Motorsport. This is in fact where the British Racing and Sports Car Club season will start next year on the weekend of March 18th, 19th, but it will be on the full Grand Prix circuit. So if you want more information on that and any of the other events and championships and series that are going to be competing throughout 2023, you can head over to the website brscc.co.uk. You can also subscribe to this channel as well by hitting the subscription button if you're watching on the BRSCC YouTube channel, because of course you'll get subscriptions to be notified when the rest of our winter esports schedule comes up, which will be throughout January and February next year as we go to a Christmas break after tonight's racing finishes. And also as well for any live stream coverage. There will be some more live stream coverage throughout the season, details of which are going to be in due course and certainly being confirmed over the next few weeks over Christmas and New Year, heading towards the new season. But we should have more excellent live stream coverage on the way next year. And of course, one paddock that's going to be full of cars once again is certainly going to be Mazda MX-5s. And in terms of average grid sizes this year, if anyone read the Autosport magazine this week, we saw that the MX-5 championships are up there right towards the top of the average grid sizes for the BRSCC, all 3 of them up into at least 30 cars in each in terms of an average grid size, which just shows how popular MX-5 racing is, not just here tonight in the esports world, but also in the real world as well. So a magnificent effort by everyone involved at BRSCC to make sure those grids are healthy, that they are popular, and they are incredibly exciting. And so far, this esports series has proven to be quite a big success as well. And as we mentioned when it was first announced, this course, it does pave the way potentially for other esports series for BRSCC, should it prove to continue to be a success, and the popularity and exposure is still good. So more drivers potentially coming in, more and more series with different cars that might get involved here could be in the mix as well. So we're just about ready to get into our last race of the evening. So of course now starting a bit further back at about 9th or 10th position on the grid now, and of course the likes of Will Redford. We saw him do this in race 3 at Alton Park, but of course that's Alton Park, a slightly different grid. Let's quickly look at the top at the grid to see who is where. Then it's actually Richard Wood who starts on pole from Rob McGregor in 2nd, then Joseph Doble and Richard Harwood 3rd and 4th, Lee Britton 5th and 6th, ahead of Mikey Doble, and then ahead of Will Blackwell Chambers, George Palozzi, John Higgins Jr., and then Will Redford back in 10th, with Lundy in 11th place, Ben Craner 12th, and Jack Noller and Luke Herbert from Jet, Pethick, Greatrex, England, Hutchings, Riley, Dalton, the Blisses, Stewart and Richard, and Matt Kendall rounding out the top 24. And it's Alex Port and Sam Smith, Huel Rosenthal and Joel Argales, Bannister, Etheridge, Grindrod, Goddard, Griffiths and Chandler. So, with Will Redford back in 10th, how do you anticipate this last race playing out here, particularly with all these guys in the mix?
I think with Mikey Noble being in 5th place and then 5 positions between himself and Will Redford, he is prime target. If he can make easy work of the front 5 in front of him, which should be easily doable for the speeds that himself and Will were doing, he should be able to get a nice big gap, but only time will tell.
Sure that Joseph won't make it too hard for him either. Last race of the evening then here at Silverstone on the International Circuit as we're underway for race number 6 of the season in the Winter Esports Series for the BRSCC. Good start from Richard Woodman from pole position. Joseph Doble's up to second already, looking around the outside of Rob McGregor into turn 1. Joseph Doble in the pack, but he gets swamped by both, looks like a little Lee Britton and Will Blackwell Chambers. The first few cars at the moment are getting it through relatively unscathed. There might be a bit of skirmishing in the background, but they're going 3 abreast for second place. Here is up the inside, looks like Richard Harwood looking for the move, and he has got it done for seconds. It through he goes. And as for our winners earlier on in the race, they haven't made too much progress.
Will
One car
Redford
on the back having a spin. That's Chris Heathruth again. That's Will Redford having a spin. Will Redford is having a big spin over the middle of the patch. Luke Herbert has gone off the road and possibly clipped the outer barrier. Now, as for Redford, where's he ended up and how much damage does he have, if any?
He's down in the 30th position there, Scott. He's literally spun it out into the village, and that's the cause and effect of being in that mid-pack race. He's got caught up a little bit there. I saw his car flipping around on the back end of that stream that we watched there. So terrible start to the race for Will Redford.
Oh, that's Harwood from Lee as well, and Lee Britton's gone, so they're all hitting stride for this opening lap or two. Also, Richard Woodman's had a mistake there too. Lee Britton off the road, coming back on sideways. Richard Harwood's off onto the grass. So it's Rob McGregor that leads the way heading up to the end of the first lap, with George Pelosi in second place. Mikey Doble is up to third. And it's Will Blackwell Chambers and Richard Jepp into P5 as well. So it's all going on. And round there goes somebody else. I think that was car 17. Alex Port, I think, went around as well. So at the end of what was quite a crazy opening lap here on this third race of Silverstone with the reverse grid. It's McGregor that leads then. Pelosi in second place. Doble in third. Blackwell Chambers got slightly sideways out over the curb, heading through Abbey. And now it's through Jet. He's got Jepp and Craner for company here as he comes up towards the complex here for the second time. Jet makes the move up the inside and through he goes. Of course, him and Craner have been battling all season in the Student Motorsport Challenge City Car Cup cars. Well, those are small little front-wheel drive micro cars, whereas these are rear-wheel drive MX-5s, and they're still pretty evenly matched. They come off the hangar straight for the second time. So the rest of the top 10 so far, then it's in Jack Noller in 7th place in the white and black car just in the back of shot. He's going side by side with Joseph Doble. Then we have Rowan Lundy in the red car number 8, and Jason Greatrex is up to 10. He's made a mega start as here comes George Pelosi up the inside, try and make the move here for the lead. He charges up the inside, gets a little sideways, knocks into the front right of Rob McGregor. He goes out wide onto the curb, and through goes Mikey Doble saying thank you very much. Through the gap of both of them, and as you quite rightly predicted, Andy, making very light work of everyone else around him. Mikey Doble straight to the lead, and everyone else trying to be second here. 5 cars into one for P2. I'm certain, Andy, that's never going to work, and over the curb goes Ben Craner. It really is kicking off. It's only lap 2.
I know, absolutely crazy opening round. Obviously lost our race 2 winner there, Will Redford, literally getting into contact, and it's always the thing of these reverse grids. It adds a little bit of element of danger because they're used to being out in the front and the clear air, but then all of a sudden they find themselves in the mid-pack, and unfortunately he got caught up in an incident. I saw his car 316 and see him smoke there coming into village again. So still again we're still seeing a lot of drivers. Just Ronan Lundy there coming off, and I think that was an incident with another car behind. I see 2 cars that were off at village, but it's all going off in this third race.
That was Joseph Doble he had the incident with, so both of those cars come to strike at the complex. Meanwhile, Doble still now leads with Jepp in second place and Blackwell Chambers third. What the battle we're looking at here looks like that was Richard Wootton, who is back in 11th position as they come through Stoke Corner. A little bit of a drift there from Richard Jepp as he's got Blackwell Chambers on his tail. And now they come down towards the complex at Club. The next group of cars behind this top 3 is Craner in 4th from Pelosi, Noller, and then McGregor, who starts on the front row of the grid. Greatrex is up to 8. He's having a great run so far in P8 in the red and white Red Line Racing car. But it's Tom Griffiths 9th and John Pethick in 10th. We should mention also, despite the spin, Will Redford is up to 17th already on this third lap. So despite the mishap he had on that opening lap, it isn't affecting his car too much. His next target, I believe, was given the next gaggle of cars we're looking at here, which is being led by Kendall. You've got Keith Dalton, the recovering Rowan Lundy, and Joseph Doble. But there he is in the background, look, the white, green and black car. That is Will Redford there too. He's got in his slipstream both John Higgins Jr. and Lee Britton, so in 17th place. And in his last lap, Will Redford was a 1 minute 15.21. He is lapping on leader pace, so given the rate he's going at the moment, it would not surprise me and if he gets at least the top 10 finish here, given how fast he's going.
Oh, 100%. He'll probably get back into that top 10. It's all about points recovery now for Will. He's not going to be in the battle for the front place. We can see there Mikey Doble stretching the lead to 1.6 seconds over Blackwell Chambers, who's managed to get past Jep for that second place overall. But one mention does need to go out to Tom Griffins in P9, up 24 places from where he started. After all that incidents in the first round, he clearly got round that unscathed and has managed to put himself in P9 at the moment. So Jack Noller there up into P6, so trying to make a recovery in this third race to get some decent points. Looking further back the field, we've got Joseph Doble there just getting a tap coming around into Vale before coming into Club there. So he's was spinning around the wrong way, which will lose him a few more positions out on track. But the battle here, and we look at Tom Griffiths, our big mover in the field, up 25 positions now into PA. He really is a man on the charge at the moment. But looking at the other end of the field, we've got some big losers. Joseph Doble down 16 positions, Lee Britton down 13 positions, Will Redford down 6 positions from where he started in P16, so really making this. So let's have a look back, Scott, at what happened to Will.
Let's have a look. So he's on the outside of Higgins Jr. He doesn't get tabbed by Higgins again, does he? That with the third race of succession. Higgins is involved in that. He then gets to the side of Luke Herbert. We saw him going off the road. Redford, I think, he just glanced at the barrel on the inside there. I don't know how much damage it gave him. Whatever damage he has got, it looks like he's able to drive around it quite easily enough. He's not being affected by it too much, it seems. So he just got caught up in that first melee, and I think John Higgins Jr. must be thinking, either have I done something, or have I got a target in the back of my car? Meanwhile, Blackwell Chambers has had a problem. He was battling for second place with Richard Jett there, but he's now heading to pit lane with an issue, so he's heading down towards out of contention in this race. Dublin leads. Oops, and there's more contact as we saw that. And if we go back here, this is what happened to Blackwell Chambers further back there. This is him battling with Richard Jett. Doble got close to the back marker there in front of him. He was very close to lucky to get away with that one. Oh, and he get tagged to the back marker before he got involved in. Car number 4 on the timing screen shows as Rob Bannister. So, unfortunately, Blackwell Chambers essentially would know where to go. And I wouldn't even say it's Bob Bannister's fault either anyway. He was simply trying to keep out of the way of a charging Mikey Doble, and all of a sudden went to look back across to get back onto the racing line and saw Will Blackwell Chambers charging through. So I think it's simply just for both cars in that case, Andy. Just quite literally, through no fault of anyone, wrong place, wrong time for both.
So if a car's slower, certainly coming around that corner, it's a very fast corner. If a car's in the way, there's not a lot you can do. These cars don't react well like maybe the more powerful cars do, like the GT3s upwards. It's almost like turning the Titanic when it's when at full speed. These cars don't like to turn quickly on a 6 month. So unfortunately, a non-avoidable accident there that's really put paid to Blackwell Chambers. It's currently down in P23 after his pit stop. But back at the front, we got Mikey Doble in first place still, 1.4 seconds ahead of Richard Jebb, who's managed to secure that second place with that incident there with Blackwell Chambers. George Pelosi, always been there or thereabouts, but sort of the bridesmaid of the field, just staying just slightly off the front battle to get that lead. Currently 1.9 second off Richard Jebb. So the front two managing to pull away from the rest of the field. So the heat of the action is certainly going to be in the mid-pack.
Yeah, Richard Jebb trying to take advantage of the fact that Mikey Doble isn't carving his way through any back markers as quickly as he would like. Saw the gap coming down to about 1.4, 1.3 seconds. So he's keeping Mikey Doble in his sights here, but of course he also has to keep one eye on the 3 cars that are charging behind him, which is Pelosi, Craner and Jack Noller. Then the next group of cars further behind. This involves Will Redford, so he's up there in 11th. He's, remember, the black, green and white car in the centre of shot number 42. Now he's on the outside of Will Redford. This is the view that we've got from car 60, which is John Higgins Jr. trying to pick his way through as well. And Redford shooting his way through in the front of Rowan Lundy, right under braking, cut him a nose of Lundy straight off. He then goes up the inside of another one of the back markers here as well. I think that's Harwood or Brittany's going with. It's car 99, which is quite far back, going back to Stuart Bliss. Or Stuart Bliss gets, whether he's made that himself, he got fired off from somewhere. I think it might have been Lee Britton made contact with him, but off the road went Stuart Bliss. So Redford then, as we predicted, is into the top 10. So he's managed to make that prediction come true. Now the question is, of course, now just under 6 minutes to go, how much higher through the top 10 can he go from P10? He's on the back of Richard Woodson now for 9th. He's only got a few seconds to make up. He might only rise as high as 9th as Richard Jebb, who's made contact. Meanwhile, that's contact, I think, possibly George Pelosi. We didn't see exactly who it was, but just saw the car made contact on one of the rear corners around he went. So I suspect possibly He just ran wide off the corner, and then there's the momentum that whoever it was that tagged him came back around, clipped his right rear, and around he went.
Yeah, so easy to do on that, but back down the field now and into the clutches of Will Redford and Richard Wootton here. So let's have a quick look at what possibly happened coming around. Did he lose it on his own? I think he did.
Oh, he did.
Lost the corner, put the brakes on, and unfortunately a carbon copy of the one we saw with Blackwell Chambers. Unfortunately, the cars behind him just had nowhere to go and got hit into the rear end.
Yeah, that's a shame. And it really did give credit literally nowhere to go. And Vicky nowhere to go. Will Redford's got nowhere to go really either, because he's been boxed in by both Richard Wootton and John Higgins Jr. He's got Wootton right in front of him. Higgins now to his inside try and make a move here into towards the complex at Club. Everyone else behind piling in. You've got the likes of Lundy, Britton there, Harwood, Dalton, all getting around car 4, which is not what the back markers. That's Bob Bannister again getting involved in the incident. Not really his fault too much, but everyone trying to get around. He's just simply trying to stay out the way towards the back of the field, but finding himself in incidents left, right and centre. Unfortunately, poor Rob, but he's carrying on regardless. So now as we watch this battle carry on going on here, this is still for ninth between, it's now for, it's for ninth now between Wootton, then Redford, Higgins Jr. who's in there as well, then the next couple of cars behind, which is then Lundy and Britton in the 2 red cars, sailing round the outside into the complex goes Will Redford, easy as you like into ninth. Now his next target, I think it might be a bit too far for him, which is Richard Jepp, who's some 6.2 seconds up the road. So I can't see him closing in 6.2 seconds in 4 minutes unless something happens to one of the top 8 in front, touch wood. It might well be in a second, because Jack Noller, who's managed to squeeze his way up into second place past George Palozzi. There's Mikey Doble in the foreground looking for his second win of the evening. He's only got to go for another roughly 3 minutes and 45 seconds to make that happen. In through Vale, in through Club, looking back from Jack Noller. And then we see here the red and white car in those proper Mazda MX-5 factory colours, just staring him down here with George Palozzi as he come onto the pit straight again. Out of shot, but right behind him is Ben Craner. There he is in the Lotus-coloured car, which is the British Racing green car with the yellow stripe down the middle. Rest of the top 10, you've got McGregor in 5th. I'd say hats off to Jason Greytrex in P6. Great drive from him to keep out of trouble to be up there in the top 10. John Pethick in 7th. Richard Jepp after his contact earlier on battling for 2nd is 8th. Then it's Redford 9th and Higgins 10th. So one or two of the main front runners not having the best of evenings in this third race, but in terms of some others who are really getting up there, it's giving them a chance to shine, whilst others are having to really get their elbows out and battle a bit harder than they expected in this third race, that's for certain.
Yeah, it definitely gives the opportunities for the drivers that are normally mid-pack races to be at the front with all the incidents that we've had from the opening lap of this third race. I mean, you look at Noller, Jack Noller, very quick, got up there for the good qualifying, had an incident, back down to the end of the field, and now we find in the third race he's up to P2. So a great recovery session overall for Jack Noller to get that second place. But Mikey Duval, which is probably justice for Mikey after what happened in that second race, at the moment just comfortably leading this third race, his second victory on course for obviously touch wood, don't want to commentate curse him at this late stage of this third race to get his second race win at the moment, but a bit of clear air for him to be able to cut through. You can see there 3 seconds ahead of Jack Noller, who's got George Palozzi for very much company for that third place. So George has been up there for every single race, going to score very valuable points in this session overall. Redford, like you said, in P9 for the moment. It's just going to be a bridge too far there to try and get any higher up and get Richard Jepp, who's about, like you say, 6 seconds ahead in P8. But look further back the field, a big battle here for P14th overall. Matt Kendall at the moment, just getting a slight hit there by Joseph Duval. Lundy's just leading out the group, this group of cars at the moment, so a good battle for P13th overall. But there's nice little battles throughout the whole of this field. The front is very much stretched out, but the mid-pack is certainly still battling and hard.
Yeah, looks like the fastest lap of the race has gone to Ben Craner by the looks of it, 1 minute 14.66 by the looks of it, so he's going to score possibly an extra bonus point for that as well. Palozzi, I think you're absolutely right, has been one of the most consistent tonight. Mikey Doble will be up there as well, of course. The fact that he picked up is on course to pick up 2 wins and a 4th place. Now on to the final lap they go of the race and of the evening, it seems, as Mikey Doble continues on. The gap is 1.1 seconds, as now we see one of the back markers here might play a factor in this scrap for 2nd, 3rd and 4th. I think we've had a pit call for Richard Wootton, I think, because he's down in 12th, or at least he's dropped back somewhere because he's now in there. So the back marker gets completely out of the way, wants to know part of this battle that's going on for the final podium places. Currently It is Jack Knowles to own, but I'm sure that Craner and Pelosi will push him all the way to the checkered flag. While this is further back, this is Keith Dalton scrapping with Matt Kendall. Those two have been a bit of action in the walls all throughout this evening, but they're in there scrapping over what's currently 15th position, so quite far inside the top 20. As they come onto the back straight for the final time, Craner was moving around this way and that. He wants the move. He's going to look to the outside line. And here comes Pelosi down the outside. Craner shoots the gap and thinks, right, can I go too deep? He's gone way too deep into the corner. Loses out to Pelosi. He's now up to third place. And he might get the challenge on for second. Pelosi slots him right in front of Craner, down towards the complex at Bayern Club for the final time. Is it going to be a last gasp move for Craner? He's going to look around the outside. If he can, he might steal third place if he's lucky. Up the inside he goes, and there's contact, and they've both gone round, they both hold it. Can Rob McGregor come through? Yes, I think he can. Mike Brikey-Devil comes across and gets his second win of the evening. George Pelosi second. Rob McGregor steals it on the final couple of corners thanks to the contact between Pelosi and Craner. They were so busy looking at each other, they made contact, and Rob McGregor snatches a podium on the final lap on the final corners because the pair of them came together in those last couple of turns towards the flag. So it's Pelosi fourth, Craner fifth, we're very aggrieved at that. Sixth is Greytrek, seventh Pethick, then it's Jep. Redford, he finishes ninth after his spin earlier on, so he only finishes in the end one place from where he started. Then John Higgins Jr. 10th, and Britain, Richard Wootton, Joseph Doble, Lundy, Kendall, Dalton, Etheridge, Harwood, Herbert and Bliss rounding out the top 20. And again, as it was in the last couple of races, positions getting decided quite literally on the last corners of the race. It really has been a night where you cannot count on anyone's position until they cross the checkered flag. It really is a case of it ain't over until the fat lady sings.
It certainly is, and Robert McGregor there getting an early Christmas present, jumping 2 places on the last 2 corners. But that was, almost like a carbon copy of that second race, coming down into club. 3 cars in the hunt for the positions, and unfortunately two of the cars make contact and almost put them out of contention. It's almost like a carbon copy of that second race. So each of these races there have almost been decided coming down into Vale through club. So been some excellent racing throughout this, and people look at this track and think, oh, it's going to be a boring track to watch, but it's anything far from the truth. It's wide, it's fast, and it's frenetic in these MX-5 cars.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're not wrong on that one at all. It's been some excellent racing all the way through. Again, not quite as frenetic as it was at Alton Park, thankfully, but still lots of energy all the way. So Mikey Doble then takes his second win of the evening. It's his end of the season here at Silverstone to round off the evening's events here at the Winter Esports Series on the international circuit. Jack Noller picks up second place, and Rob McGregor takes the surprise third after it was contact right at the first part of club between George Pelosi and Ben Craner on the final lap that puts them down to 4th and 5th position respectively. Jason Greytrex picks up an excellent 6th place from John Pethick in 7th, then Richard Jep 8th. Will Redford recovers from that first lap incident to go from what was as low as about 27th place up to 9th position in the end, I should say, and then John Griffiths rounds out the top 10. And then that's followed up by Lee Britton in 11th place, Richard Wootton 12th, Joseph Doble 13th, then Rowan Lundy 14th, Matt Kendall, Keith Dalton, Chris Etheridge and Richard Harwood from the top 18. Rounding out the top 20 was Luke Herbert and Richard Bliss, and Will Blackwood Chambers had his problems and he dropped down to 21st position. 22nd goes to Alex Port from Nick Grindrod in 23rd. He had quite a quiet evening, being a lap behind. Then Simon Hutchings, Matt Goddard, Hill Rosenthal, James Riley and Harry England rounding out the top 28. And the last few cars in the order, Rob Bansden had a very, very eventful fast race, getting involved in a couple of incidents. In many cases, there was no fault of his own, just trying to keep out of the way, and other cars getting involved in their own separate incidents. And Tom Griffiths down in third. He had a bit of an unknown race, didn't quite see what happened to him, but Tom Griffiths, after his charges in race number 2, really disappointing third race down in 30th place. So he had a really poor run of that to round off to the evening. And then Stuart Bliss in 31st, followed by the remaining few cars on top of that as well, with Argelez, Sam Smith and Piers Chandler. So lots of action, lots of activity going on, lots of eventfulness going on throughout this evening. But I think once again, as it was at Alton Park, I think some of the drivers certainly have cleaned up a little bit, and I mean that in the best possible way, because it was quite a frenetic and energetic first round at Alton Park. But I think you could tell that some of the driving standards, there was a definite difference between Alton Park and this evening, where some are taking the time in this couple of weeks between rounds to just refine their spatial awareness, refine their racecraft, refine their feeling of the car, get the practice laps in, get themselves set up, and in the end, really find themselves in a much better shape of form. And also, the field was a lot closer in terms of the front. It wasn't just Will Redford running away there. He had a lot of challenges out there, had his own challenges with incidents and spins and contact with other drivers. But it certainly shows that, one, somebody other than Mikey Doble then Will Redford can win a race. And two, I think it's only going to get closer and closer as the next few rounds go on, going into next year.
100%. 100%. A lot of the drivers, obviously, after the first round, just realised how realistic iRacing was. It wasn't like another Gran Turismo race. It's actually there is tactics, and the cars are very similar to the real life. And you can certainly see in this second race, the driving standards on the whole of the field have vastly improved. Probably a lot of drivers putting in a bit more practice just to make them more competitive in this race, because practicing in this car, certainly in the new setup and the new tyre model, will make it that little bit more difficult for the drivers. But you can certainly see the step over there.
Well, let's get to the interviews underway then. First of all, the man who picked up 2 races from victories from this evening, and that's Mikey Doble. Mikey, congratulations. Great running tonight, of course. I think the key thing is, of course, you had some great pace tonight. You managed to carry it on from Alton Park, and I think you proved that other people other than Will Redford can go out there and win a race, and you certainly took the race to him tonight.
Yeah, it's nice to change it up a little bit at the front. It was a good comeback after last week, after some technical issues where my game froze actually gridding up for race 2, hence why I missed the start of race 2 last couple of weeks ago, if anyone was wondering. But no, really pleased with the pace. Felt like I raced well tonight. The racecraft was good. Probably could have been 3 wins actually, if unfortunately John misjudged his braking zone into the last chicane. But sometimes that happens. It's racing.
Yeah, that was quite a tough one, of course. You were really up in contention, and John just tried to squeeze his way through there. Was that so much the case, you think, just him just being a little bit sort of, in terms of being in position to try and make a pass, but you say just simply just missing his breaking point because he was just caught up in the moment, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of racing with John. We're quite pally with each other, so it definitely wasn't intentional. I don't even believe he was trying to go for the move. I think he was trying to follow me through past Will, and unfortunately he broke a little bit late by the looks of things and tried to go to the left to maybe avoid hitting me, but I was there and I spun off, but still recovered to finish 5th and 2 wins. I can't complain at that.
Yeah, definitely so, because in your real life sort of racing thing, particularly in the last few seasons, you're very much used to real world driving. Of course, you've driven the Compact Cup car, you've driven, of course, the GT5 car. In terms of either one, or in terms of the similarities in both, this MX-5, in terms of how it feels compared to the cars you've driven in real life that are rear-wheel drive, which one of those two in particular, if you want to call it that, do you think is it close to? Is it closer more to the Ginetta because it's a sports car, or because it's a bit more nimble? Do you think it's more close to the BMW, or is it somewhere in between, or is there similarities in a bit of both?
Yeah, they are. It is very similar. I'd say it's right in the middle between BMW Compact Cup car and the Ginetta GT5 Challenge car. I mean, it's got elements of both. I think grip-wise, mechanical grip, it's got the mechanical grip of the Compact Cup car, being on road tyres. It's very soft, very lazy. However, with a sequential gearbox and very good on the brakes, it does have its similarities to the Ginetta as well. So the Ginetta is a little bit more twitchy than the Mazda. The Mazda, you can hold a slide much easier, where the Ginetta runs the slick tyres. But no, I mean, I really enjoy driving it because I guess it does resemble the cars I drive in real life.
I can imagine so. And of course, now we've got you got a chance to kind of get a few more laps in over the winter period. What do you think you'll do, if anything, to keep your hand in to make sure that you're ready for the next couple of rounds that are coming up? The other side of the new year in terms of that racing. So, is it a case of just doing the practice laps to get it in, or are you going to take a bit of a break and just get yourself sort of rested and recharged before you get back into it close to the time?
Well, I don't know. I'll probably forget about it for a week or so, maybe get Christmas out of the way. But the good thing is that they're mostly around British tracks, and I think the other track is at Laguna Seca, maybe.
Yeah.
So they're all tracks that I know very well from real life racing and a lot of sim racing. And this car I know very well. Like tonight, for example, I didn't turn a lap before qualifying, so it's just I mean, I'm not too worried about putting in too many laps before the next round. But yeah, I really enjoy that racing on the British tracks more so than some of the other tracks in the game, and I think the BRSCC have done a great job in selecting a great calendar.
Fantastic. Well, appreciate the compliment on that side of things, and I think you've driven superbly in the first couple of meetings so well. So I think all we can say is rest up and recharge. Congrats on your 2 victories, and we'll see you the other side of New Year and see you get on in the next couple of rounds in January. But for now, congratulations, and we'll see you then.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
Great stuff. So excellent stuff to hear from our double race winner, Mikey Doble. Let's have a chat to the man who also took a race victory, but also had his own share of ups and downs throughout tonight. That's Will Redford. Will, that's now 4 wins out of 6 on the board for tonight, but I think had certain events not happened, it potentially could have been more than that, couldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's always, these races are always going to be chaotic, especially when we have reverse grids involved as well. So, you know, race 1, I feel like I could have challenged Mikey for the win on the last lap, but I got a little bit of a tap from behind, which took me back into 4th. Race 2, Mikey got sent off the track, so that gave me the win. And then race 3, I was involved in the lap 1 crash. So, you know, it's up and down, but we still scored good points in the end. Even after the crash in race 3, we still finished 9th. So it could have been a lot worse than what it was.
Yeah, race 3 very much seemed like a bit of damaged imitation just to get as many points as possible. We were talking in commentary that in terms of where you could have, the pace you were setting, that a top 10 very much was realistic. You did get that. You managed to pick up a good top 10 finish. But in terms of the points that you scored there, that's crucial for the championship in terms of how you score. But I think one challenge that, is it fair to say the challenge you're going to face now going forwards is that compared to Alton Park, some of the drivers have had a bit more practice, they're more used to the sim now, they're more used to the cars and the baseline setup. Do you think it's now, Silverstone was a clear indication that there's more and more drivers are getting towards your level of pace that you had at Alton Park, and it is getting more competitive towards the front? Because there was a good battle of 4 or 5 cars in those first 2 races that you were amongst, which were pretty much on your pace, not just a little bit crook on some point. So it definitely already, from a second round point of view, has closed up a bit more in terms of the competitiveness of the field.
I think it's more the track. This track is very drafty. So, I mean, I showed in qualifying that I was the fastest, and when I was, you know, leading the first race and the second race, I was setting the pace, even though the guys behind me had the draft. So I think it's a lot more to do with the track, which is allowing people to keep up, less so than people catching it. But the car has changed quite a bit as well. It's a lot easier to be more consistent now than what it was 2 weeks ago because of the new season update. So I think people are getting a little closer, but it's going to depend on what track we're at as to how big the battles are at the front. I think Mikey's always going to be around my pace. And probably John Higgins Jr. as well. But the more drafted tracks we go, such as Silverstone, the more bigger fights there'll be at the front. And then the more technical tracks we go, I think it's going to, such as Alton last time out, it's going to open up a bit more.
So, of course, now talking about the next couple of tracks coming up, of course, we've got this winter break coming in now, of course, over Christmas and New Year. So racing will resume obviously in January, the other side, as we head to 2023. For you, is it simply just going to be a case of just take a break and then once you're ready nearer the time, because obviously you're quite confident in the pace that you've got, is it going to be a case of just sit back and take a break and then get back into the sim when you're ready, or are you going to keep on putting the practice laps in until then to keep the momentum? Because, of course, I think it's almost certain others will do the same to wherever possible to try and get themselves a little bit closer towards the front, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a few different things that I'm taking part in, not necessarily just this. So there's a few other things I need to practice first, and then when the week comes around for the next race of this, I'll jump in and do some practice. But until then, I'll be racing other things on the service.
Of course, it was good to keep your hands in many cases. But you've driven for essentially for the majority of the season superbly. Of course, you had a bit of bad luck in 1 or 2 points, but for the most part, it's another victory. It's the more points on the board. I think you can keep yourself in a good position for the championship heading into the next rounds, the other side of the new year into January. So well done for the points that you scored in the victory tonight, and we'll see you next year when, of course, racing continues over the next couple of rounds. But for now, congrats, and we'll see you then.
Thanks, mate. Have a good year.
And G, thanks very much. Right, next one we'll drag in, I think, is going to be... I think let's have a chat to the man who took a bit of a surprise podium in race number 3 after everything was going on. I think that's Rob McGregor, who I think it's safe to say, if we bring him in, Rob, let's just go back to race number 3 on that last lap, of course. You're in 5th position, and then the incident in front of you happens, and then what was going through your mind when it happened? You must have been beside yourself when those two had that contact up at Vale, wasn't it?
I think, yeah, there was excitement and a lot of swearing. I was on the comms to my teammate, John Higgins Jr., my teammate, and I was like, I'm not going to repeat the words because obviously we're going to keep it PG, but the excitement was coming out of you could tell, and poor Junior was getting it all. So yeah, that night there just sums up the full extent of what you should expect from Mazda racing, close racing, and some up and downs. I didn't have a great race 2, but I had a great race 3 and race 1. So I started 20th in the grid and then finished race 1 and 6th. So I'm not going to complain. You know what I mean? So yeah, positive.
Yeah, I was going to say, just talk us through your night in many cases, because of course you had it's a variety of different fortunes, but it looked as though that pace-wise you looked fairly consistent in terms of how strong you were at some points as well. You were always kind of hovering in and around the sort of the top 10 in terms of points. So I'm certain you were starting course towards, if not on the front row of the grid as well for race number 3, thanks to the reverse top 10 for the final race. So I think it proves that in terms of pace, you've certainly got it there, and you've got the ability to score some very solid points throughout the season, of course, haven't you?
Yeah, I think my goal is just to finish within the top 10. Obviously, anything higher up than that is brilliant. You know, you've got a lot of a lot of decent drivers in here, a lot of competitive drivers, and a lot of champions. You know, you've got like the Mark III World Champion, the Mark III BRSCC champion. You've got Mikey Doble. That's the caliber of driver that you've got in this championship. So it's pretty hard when you come up against them guys, but I can't lie, I love the car, the way it handles, so it suits me down to the ground, and I love driving. The Mark IVs on this sim, so yeah, brilliant fun.
And just on that point, of course, there's been a couple of updates with the time model and the different baseline set up on this car as well. For you, racing these cars compared to how it was, it's a different circuit, but in terms of the setup that you had at Alton compared to what there was at Silverstone for a baseline sort of default setup, what, if major or not, what sort of differences can you feel in the time model and the setup compared to what there was at Alton? Some were talking about it being a bit more understeery, being a bit more sort of colder tyres in the first couple of laps. What, for you as a driver, did you find in the differences in the setup from one race weekend to the other based on the different builds?
You know, I found once I got into a rhythm, like my rhythm was consistent, like my lap times were consistent, so I was doing like 1:15.5s to 1:15.4s every lap. And you know, they'll all complain the same. The first 2 laps is horrible. Like, don't get me wrong, the first 2 laps is horrible, but that's similar in real life. Once the heat's there, then you can push forward. But you know, the update from last round at Alton and this round is there's certainly more understeer, in my opinion. And then going into fast corners, you obviously the back end can kind of slip out, so you've got to watch how hard you're braking, and also trail braking helps because obviously it lifts up the front end as you go into the corner, so you get more grip back to your back end as well. So yeah, these are things to take on board. There's a lot of things going on with iRacing, hence why it was delayed tonight. You know, the start was delayed tonight, and they've updated it today. Yeah, I'm not going to complain because, as you've seen, I can drive the car pretty well, you know. So I'm pretty happy with what I did tonight. Looking forward to the next round. Want to give a shout out to my teammate Junior. He did amazing tonight. And yeah, looking forward to the next round. Also, I would like to give a shout out to Hills Motorsport, because they obviously have the stickers all over the car, and yeah. But going forward, great. Yeah. Thank you for having us, guys. But I don't know if that was everything you need from me, but yeah, I'll go.
Yeah, no problem at all. I was going to say, you done some good, consistent stuff tonight, so good job on the driving you had tonight, Rob. And of course, we'll see the other side of a new year for when the next rounds kick off. But again, great driving tonight, and we'll see you the other side in 2023 for when the season continues.
Of course, mate. Yeah, of course. Thank you, Scott. Cheers, mate.
No worries. Thank you, Rob. Right, let's have a chat to 2 more we've got waiting down there. First of all, or 2 or 3 more I think we can have a chat to. First of all, let's have a chat to the man who came into the evening up there towards the front of the points and had some decent results in the top 10, particularly getting second in that last race, which is Jack Knoll. Let's bring Jack in to have a chat. Jack, another solid evening's racing for you, of course, capped off with a second place in that final race as well. Just talk us through your event, because of course you've had quite a decent haul of points, and that should certainly keep you towards the top of the points, I think, shouldn't it?
Well, it would have been more solid if I didn't jump the start on the first race, which is unfortunate. Yeah, so what happened there was a new rig, don't have a clutch, put it into first, and the car jolted forward slightly. As unfamiliar with iRacing, so that's what happened. And then unfortunately there was no clear black flag button mapped. But that is what it is. So I had to come through the field the second race. There was contact here and there, so car damage slightly. So didn't quite make that reverse grid top 10, but still, come the final race, it was chaos. So managed to make the most of it and managed to pull it through to P2. Like almost had to go with Mikey with that traffic at the end, but I almost would have felt bad if I had to go with him because of how much time he lost. But it is what it is. I take a few drop rounds from this, but only 2 drop rounds. That means I've got 1 in the bag, being as I got 1 good result from today. So all in all, good fun. Racing from different rigs and getting used to that quickly was the challenge this time. So hopefully we're more up to speed next weekend.
Yeah, you'll have plenty of time, of course, over the Christmas and New Year period to get to grips with it before we get the next rounds underway in January. I think Race 3 in particular showed some really good pace, because I think it was one of those races where it pretty much just surviving the first couple of laps is what it was all about, because you had those cars slightly out of position and the reverse, partially reverse grid with the top 10 inverted. So I think once you settle down after those last couple of first couple of laps, you've got sort of the battle you had here with Jep, Craner and Pelosi at the front. That it was quite a solid battle between you four until sort of Jet fell off, and then of course the 2 cars in front had their mishap behind you as well. So, but when you guys were in the thick of it, it looked like it was quite an enjoyable battle between the 4 of you in the middle of that race.
Yeah, it was really good. It was just trying to keep together at that point in the race. It was picking your moves, who do you bump draft, who do you try, because you can still catch the guys ahead at that point. But then obviously, unfortunately, it all fell to bits every so often. Will had his moments but yeah, it was, as much as it was chaos in some places, there were some really good racing throughout, like really smart, really close sometimes, a little bit of door to door. There's quite a few times with 3 wide into Stowe, and slipstream in these is huge, so that was very enjoyable there.
Great stuff. And of course, you as much as anyone else is having to get to grips with new baseline setup, new time model. What are your thoughts on this car, and what sort of differences or similarities or quirks of this car have you now found, given the switch over to the new setup and the new time model? Have you found anything that works more to your favour, or has it kind of more gone the other way? How have you sort of found the changes and the differences in this car now?
I hadn't even driven the car until today with the setup or any of the changes. So, and because of also it's a completely different rig, I think I was more getting used to the rig than how the car feels. So I'll probably better answer that question next weekend when I'm back to my original rig, so I have a bit of a comparison. But typically the car felt a little bit more pointy, so you don't have to. But yeah, it's difficult to say because most of the time I had front left toe damage. But so it was a bit understeery through the right-handers. It was different. I think it spins its wheels easier once you start keeping it spinning with a tyre model. So before it would settle down and bog down, so you've got to control that wheel spin once you start sliding a little bit more. But apart from that, that's all I've felt from this time.
Great stuff. Well, the next couple of rounds until I think January 12th for Donington, so you've got plenty of time to get to grips with the new, back to your old rig and with the new setup in many cases. But yeah, for the points that you have scored and the second place that you got in race number 3, again, more superb driving as usual. And we'll see you the other side of 2023 and see how you get on at the next one. Well done.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year for then.
Likewise. Thank you very much, Jack. Thanks very much. Right, time for 2 more. I think we'll quickly rattle through them. First of all, let's have a chat to Lee Britton, who had his own ups and downs once again throughout the evening here at Silverstone. Lee, very much like Alton Park, maybe a little bit better in some cases. You once again had an evening of fairly different ups and downs and varying fortunes. Just talk us through your night from your perspective.
Yeah, I don't know who gave me the nickname of Yo-Yo last week, but it seems like it's been a bit of a yo-yo ride again this week. So yeah, I didn't qualify very well. I think that's a result of not putting too much practice in. And then the first race I actually did really well. I got from 16th up to 6th position, and then had a little bit of coming together with someone and span. Ended up 9th, so not too bad. Second race, what happened? I'm trying to remember now. I think it was a pretty consistent race. You know, I was just started 6th and finished around 6th as well. Started 9th, finished 6th, and then the third race I was up into 4th place on the first lap. and then 2 cars span in front of me. You probably saw that going midway through Stowe, which put me into a spin, and then I was back to 23rd, and then me, Will, and John Higgins were just fighting back through as a train, and managed to get back up to 11th, 10th, and then a back marker sort of blocked me on the second from last corner, so John just pits me at the end. But overall, generally good racing. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, did you find that in some elements, some of the pack had closed up a little bit more compared to Alton Park? 'Cause it seemed as though, whether some like Will was saying it was circuit dependent, others were saying that the competitiveness had gone up a little bit more because people had more time in the cars, or they were getting to grips with the new tire model and the new sort of base set on stuff a bit quicker than others. Did you feel as though, regardless of circuit or anything else, that tonight the field was a little bit more competitive and there was more closer racing between packs and people were getting to grips with these cars more than they had done back at Alton?
Yeah, I think that people are starting to put a bit more serious practice into these races. Between rounds, that seems to be showing. And the qualifying was so tight today. There was very very few temps between the top 10 or 15, I think. So yeah, I think that it's definitely getting more competitive. And being Silverstone, there is that tow factor as well. So even if someone in front of you is a bit quicker, you can actually tag onto them for most part. So yeah, I think both of those things combined made those sort of groups really stay together.
And in terms of the next rounds coming up, of course, I mean, how much practice and how much prep are you going to put in for those next kind of rounds? Are you just going to take Christmas and New Year off and then sort of get back at it the other side of New Year?
Yeah, I will definitely be putting practice in. I'll probably do some before Christmas. I do find if I do too much of the same car and track, you can get a little bit crazy. So I tend to try and switch it up a bit. But yeah, I will be practicing before the next one, no doubt.
Great stuff. Well, hope the practice goes well, and hopefully that the next time out, rather than being yo-yo up and down, you can have a slightly more consistent even and get some good, more solid points. But until then, enjoy the break and get the practice laps in, and we'll see you for the next rounds at Donington Park back in January. But for now, another decent night's driving, and we'll see you then. Well done. Yeah.
Thanks to the BRSCC. It's been really good so far. So very enjoyable, and yeah, have a good Christmas, everyone.
Likewise. Thank you very much. And let's bring in the last man to talk to, the man, of course, who looks after this series along with myself, who again had something of a up and down night, but I'm sure in his own way he'll tell us in his own words. Will Blackwell Chambers. I guess just talk us through your night, because at a couple of points you up there towards the front, had a couple of decent results, and then you dropped down with an incident. So yeah, I'm sure you'll enlighten us with how your evening's work at Silverstone went.
Evening. Yeah, I was quite happy. I was on the pace-ish. 2 P5s, really happy with that. Was sat in P2 in race 3, and back markers need some education, which we'll be working on over the next couple of weeks. Let's leave it at that. I'm a little bit less than impressed, but I've got to listen to my own rules and wait some time before putting the protest form in. But we'll be fine. So yeah, no, overall I think tonight went better. There was some good driving. There was also some interesting driving still, and we've got some drivers on a watch list who will be being contacted this evening. But other than that, I think it was generally really good.
Yeah, I think from what we saw of it, in terms of some were saying that tonight it looked on the whole that the entire field was a lot more competitive. If you look at the qualifying results, the top 21 cars were separated by less than a second. Whether that was down to the circuit, whether it was down to just people getting closer, I'd like to think there was maybe a bit of both, but it did look as though overall that drivers were closer, the racing was closer, there were more packs of cars together, and they were close together in proximity to each other. Any sort of spinted incidents aside, it looks as though that people are taking the time between Alton Park and Silverstone. And Andy, you're free to come in on this as well and talk about it yourself, because we'll make it a round discussion to round things off. Is that it seems as though on the whole that everyone seemed to have kind of taken on board some of the lessons, some of the warnings or the talking tos from Alton Park, and they seem to be a little bit more sort of together with it. There was 1 or 2 incidents, but I don't think they were at the same level that Alton Park was. But it looked as though on the whole everyone was a bit more together, was a bit more cautious of each other, a bit more considerate of making moves in general. And on top of that, it gave us some really good racing on top of that, with lots of close action. And I'm certain as the season continues to go on, and now there's that gap between now and Donington in January, that more people will use the time to work on the racecraft, work on the spatial awareness, work on their competitiveness with this new car, with the new time model and a new base setup, and get even closer. But it looked as though, to me, from an outside perspective, not being behind the wheel, it was definitely more competitive and closer in terms of cars around each other and cars in that leading group.
The leading group, I think everyone closed off a bit. Silverstone, massive slipstream definitely helps. But you know, I've having a chat with the guys at the front, and what's really positive is everyone's absolutely loving it. They're finding it a brilliant experience, and that's really good. And I'm hearing that more up and down the field tonight than the other one. So that's definitely positive, and it shows that the way we're developing. As we mentioned last time, we've got a lot of people who are very, very new to iRacing, and we still need to help coach those drivers forward. But I think, you know, as a whole, the group's maturing, it's getting there, and we're going to keep having better and better races as the season goes on.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you can see that. And that's always the effect when you get into the league racing. The first couple of races, everybody's trying to get the feel of everybody else around them on the grid. Like you say, you've got different classes of drivers in the real world in here driving different cars. They're driving all the same cars, the same fixed setup. So, you know, as the season progresses, you're going to naturally get the guys getting a lot better racecraft, getting used to the cars, how it handles. And one thing I certainly have noticed is, as you saw from Robert McGregor, is, you know, the pure excitement from, you know, they're not racing in the real world. This is the simulator world, but the level of excitement from the drivers when you speak to them in the interview is probably the same, if not more excited than probably what it is in real life. You know, they get a real buzz. So and as you said, I think, Will, on the interview you done with ARL TV, was you know, you really get it, and when you're on the grid you get that nervous feel like you're in a real life. So you know, the realism and the immersion within this is almost as competitive as the real life.
It's not almost as competitive, it's certainly as competitive. You know, the feeling's awesome. You know, the fact that I can do this while sat in my office is fantastic, and believe me, it's a fair bit cheaper than real racing as well. So, you know, sim racing's come an immense way. But as you mentioned, I think, you know, one of the things that is tricky with this league is there are a lot of real drivers real drivers tend to have egos and tend to, you know, they know how fast they can normally drive. And I think, you know, that creates a frustration on the sim because it's not as easy as it looks. You know, there's a lot of drivers who sort of come off real life and think it's just a sim. How hard can it be? And it really is. And I think that's sort of what people are sort of learning. You know, they're trying to do stuff that they can do, that they think they can do in real life, but that just isn't quite possible yet on the sim. But, you know, that's part of the learning, and we're all getting there together, sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely so. It looks as though that the competitiveness of the field has continued to go up and up, and I think some of the battles everyone had out tonight was setting testament to that. I guess now, of course, the look forward is to the fact that we have got quite a bit of a break. It's practically sort of a month's break or so, for good reason, because we've got a little couple of things such as Christmas and New Year to get out of the way on that one. Are you expecting to be even closer going forward into the next couple of rounds in January? Because I anticipate it'll be even closer by the time we get to the Laguna Seca, and even that will be a bit of an unknown, given that hardly anyone, I imagine, at least from real world experience, if not anyone, will have experience of that circuit apart from driving a few laps. But Donington Park Grand Prix coming up next. Of course, that's another favourite in general, the Donington Park for Mazda MX-5 drivers, in particular those who race with BRSCC. I anticipate it's going to get even closer. More drivers will put in more practice over the winter, and I think that the likes of Will Redford and Mikey Doble will have maybe a couple more drivers up there getting out there and challenge them. I'm sure that you'll be one of them at some point going forward at some stage, and I think it's only going to get closer and more competitive, and more cars up towards the front as the season goes on. I'm almost certain.
But I agree with that. I think everybody's getting there. I think we had a couple fast drivers this evening actually having some technical difficulties with, you know, hardware. So I'm sure they'll be straight back up there. So you got Jack Noller and Tom Griffiths, who both were having technical difficulties tonight, and they'll be straight back up the front. So no, I think it's going to be very strong at Donington. And as you say, we've got a bit of off time now. We've got some fun races lined up for the drivers to keep their eye in and to keep them, you know, behind the wheel. So we're going to be doing those, not televised, but they're just to keep everyone entertained during the winter break. And we'll be back at it in January.
Definitely will. Right, for the time being then, again, thank you very much to Will, of course, for your playing your part in putting all this tool together, of course. I tell you a massive debt of gratitude for it. And of course, going forwards, we'll keep on active on the Discord servers as well and keep the drivers informed of what's going on and see how they're getting on. And of course, then once Christmas and New Year has passed, we'll be straight back at it. for the next rounds at Donington Park and Not Kill. But yeah, until then, again, for the results that you did get, well done. Think hopefully all goes well over the festive period, and we'll be back racing once again in a few weeks' time, ready to go in 2023. But until then, great job.
Can I just say thank you to Apex Racing TV for accommodating us tonight as well. iRacing threw us a bit of a curveball with the update. So thank you very much for altering your schedules at such a short notice. It's much appreciated.
Yes, yeah, I get that. Thank you very much on that side again. And again, thank you to Will. Thank you for your efforts tonight, and we shall see you at the next rounds in a few weeks' time.
Cheers.
Great stuff. We'll quickly wrap things up, but Andy, obviously want to bring you in just to give your final thoughts on the evening. Yeah, as we said, the overall theme seems to be, regardless of the circuit playing its part or not, the field is definitely catching up. There's more competitive drivers up towards the front that can certainly win races. Do you think there's going to be more of that tone set now going forwards into the next couple of rounds, given we've got the next few coming up? Two very different circuits are coming up in the next couple of meetings, Donington and Not Kill. But how much more do you think the field's going to close up in that sense?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, obviously league racing, a lot of the drivers, real life, and they're trying to take them skills and bring it onto the virtual iRacing track. You know, so a lot of the drivers have had a baptism of fire at Alton Park. But like with any league that gets on, as you get further and further into the league, the drivers understand the cars, they get better racecraft, and the racing gets a lot better. But you can see a step up from Alton Park to tonight. It may have had something to do with the track, and it is. So the telling will certainly be Donington Park, which is another tight technical track. So that's going to be an indication of how well the drivers are doing. But as a spectacle, you know, tonight was brilliant, really good 15-minute races all the way to the last couple of corners, all three races, and yeah, it bodes well for the rest of the championship.
Yeah, can't disagree with that. I think it's set to be quite an exciting time. Well, again, thank you very much to you, Andy. Of course, thank you, of course, to Lee, who's been on production and cameras tonight. Thank you to Apex team and to everyone that's taken part tonight as well. For those who are interested, the next round is going to be January 12th, 2023. It's Donington Park on the Grand Prix circuit. So we've got roughly about a month's break or so whilst that happens. If you want to find out about the esports series or any of the championships and series that BRSCC runs and all the plans and the race events coming up for next year, because we've got the full calendar of events now up there for 2023, or just about, a couple more still to put up there once things are confirmed, head over to the website brscc.co.uk. Also hit the subscribe button on the BRSCC YouTube channel, and of course Apex Racing TV if you're watching on that channel too. And of course you can also head to facebook.com/BRSCC and like that page as well. There's plenty of exciting racing coming up for next year, so you want to get involved in that one too. Again, my thank you to Andy, thank you to Lee, thanks to everyone at Apex Racing TV, thanks to everyone involved in the series as well, and thank you to watching as well from myself, Scott Woodward, and all of us here. It's been another fantastic night of BRSCC Winter Esports Racing Series Racing. We now take a break for Christmas and New Year. For those who are watching, of course, again, have a fantastic Christmas and New Year. We'll see you the other side in 2023 when the Winter Esports Series continues on the Donington Park Grand Prix circuit, January 12th, 2023. Don't miss it, but until then, have a fantastic festive period. We'll see you then. Bye for now.